Settle in, close your eyes, and let the quiet reality of the past drift over you like a gentle tide. Tonight, on Sleeping History, we drift away from the roaring cannon fire, fluttering black flags, and wild stories of pirate treasure, to discover the slower, more uncomfortable truths of daily life at sea. This is not the world of swashbuckling heroes and hidden gold, but of sleepless nights, salt-stained clothes, and hunger that bites harder than any blade. For the next little while, you are neither captain nor stowaway, but simply an observer, watching, listening, and gently drifting off as the waves carry you far from the safe harbor of myth. It is a story of wooden ships creaking in the night, of boredom broken by terror, of makeshift meals, cold winds, and the endless horizon. Let's set sail, quietly, into the reality of pirate life. A world far less glamorous than you think. The last thing before starting is to tell me, in the comments, where are you watching from? It's really nice seeing people from around the world come together and listen to our stories. Now, let's finally begin. Waking aboard a pirate ship. Mornings of reality, not romance drift, slowly now into a different sort of morning. One that belongs to no legend or storybook. Imagine you are far from land, and far from the heroic noise of pirate movies, lost instead in the slow, silent dawn that creeps across the creaking beams of a ship, with no name, adrift on the endless grey Atlantic. There is no bright sunlight streaming through billowing curtains, no elegant stateroom to wake in. Instead, there is the sound, the thick, muffled sound of bodies shifting, boots scraping, someone coughing through a throat raw from brine and cold air. You are one of dozens, or even hundreds, pressed close in the darkness below decks, where the wood above your head drips from the night's condensation, and where every plank remembers the footsteps of the night watch. A pirate's bunk is not a bed at all, but a shared shifting patch of space. You sleep where you can, on a pile of rope, against a barrel, under the long shadows of stacked crates. If you are lucky or quick, you have claimed a hammock, slung from beams blackened with smoke and sweat, swaying in rhythm with the ship's slow, endless motion. But most men, and nearly all boys, sleep on planks, or directly on the canvas covering the cargo below, wrapped in a blanket that has not been dry since you left the last port. The night has not been restful. You feel the soreness in your shoulders, the ache in your knees and back, the dull, relentless pressure in your neck, from sleeping twisted, careful not to bump a neighbor, or be bumped yourself. At sea, even sleep must be earned and defended. Somewhere near your feet, a rat scurries, bold and unworried by the groans and shifting bodies. Rats live here too. They always have, always will, and they are as much a part of this ship as any pirate flag or battered cannon. The smell below decks is indescribable, but you know it well. It is the smell of sweat, and hair, and old wounds, of wet rope, and spilled ale, of fish that was never fresh, of tar, and salt and human breath. It is not disgusting, not anymore. It is only the air you breathe, thick and constant. When morning comes, it comes not as a soft light, but as a gradual awareness. The voices above begin, the boots tramp overhead, and the thin grey light finds its way through every crack and gap in the hull. You blink, rub your face, cough once, hoping, as always, that you have not caught the fever that has already taken 2 men and a boy since the last port. Someone is muttering about the food, or the lack of it. Someone else grumbles about the captain, about the weather, about the never-ending, always familiar ache of hunger. You reach for your boots, always careful to shake them for scorpions, crabs, or far more often, cockroaches, that find their way into every dark space. If your boots are wet, you curse. If they are missing, you curse louder. Perhaps someone needed them for a night watch, or perhaps a friend has simply borrowed them, promising to return them at breakfast. You pull your coat close, wool or canvas, patched 100 times, and crawl out of your nest. All around you, other men do the same, grumbling, stretching, some already searching for a place to relieve themselves, others making straight for the stairs. If you are new to this life, you learn quickly. Never leave your blanket, your coat, or your boots where someone desperate might find them. Never turn your back on the youngest crew, nor trust the oldest, for everyone aboard has learned that survival is a matter of cunning, of making do, of taking what is needed, and apologizing. Sometimes, afterwards, you climb the ladder up to the main deck. The boards are slick with dew, the rails cold, the sails high overhead, limp in the dawn wind. The ship rocks gently, or not so gently, and the morning chill finds every gap in your clothing, making you shiver, even as you blink into the pale daylight. If you pause a moment, you can look out and see nothing but sea, sea and more sea, gray, green, blue, whatever color the clouds and sun choose to paint on this particular morning. You do not feel the romance of it. You feel the empty gnawing in your belly, and the ache in your shoulders, and the slight irritation of the lice that live in every seam of your shirt. The boatswain's voice is the first real sound of the day, a bark, a command, a name shouted for some unlucky soul who failed to stow something properly the night before. You join the others at the rail for your morning meal, if it can be called that. There is no spread of fruit, no coffee, no hot bread. There is only hard tack, biscuits baked hard as stone, filled with weevils, so old and so dry that you must soak them in a mug of water or beer before your teeth can make a dent. You know better than to complain. Food is food, and any food at sea is precious. You bite, slowly spitting out the largest bugs, and eating the rest, knowing that protein is protein, no matter how it crawls. You are given a scrap of salted beef or pork, if there is any left. Sometimes it is so tough you chew for minutes before it softens. Sometimes it is so rotten you eat around the green bits, grateful for the salt that hides the taste. There is water, brackish, sometimes brown, always warm by midday, always carrying a faint taste of the barrel, and often a few specks of floating mold. If you are lucky, there is beer or watered-down rum, a small comfort that stings your cracked lips, but soothes the complaints in your stomach. The men eat in silence, or in low, careful voices. No one has energy for laughter before the work begins. You watch the sky as you eat, noting the clouds, the wind, the movement of birds if there are any. Every sailor learns the sky as well as he knows his own hands. It is the only warning of storms, or sometimes a sign that land is near. Breakfast over, the chores begin. No one on a pirate ship is idle. There are sails to mend, lines to coil, decks to swab, buckets to empty. The captain will have a list, and the boatswain will enforce it. If you are unlucky, you are put to work in the bilge, pumping out the stale, stinking water that seeps and leaks into the lowest part of the ship. The bilge is a world of darkness and slime, where rats and cockroaches thrive, and where the air is so foul even the toughest sailors tie rags over their faces. If you are luckier, you are sent aloft to patch sails, climbing rigging slick with dew, hands freezing, knees shaking as you cling to ropes far above the deck. The bravest, or the most foolish volunteer for the crow's nest, where the cold wind slices through your coat, and the ship's motion is doubled by the sway of the mast. The youngest and smallest are set to scurry about, fetching and carrying, always in someone's way, always learning from the curses and blows of the older hands. All morning, the work continues. No one speaks of treasure, or adventure, or the next great prize. The talk, if any, is of food, of women left behind in port, of wounds that will not heal, of debts that will never be paid. If you are old enough, you remember the last storm, the last time the mast split, and the sails tore and half the crew was lost to the sea. If you are young, you think only of your next meal, your next chance to rest. By midday, the sun is up, the deck is hot, and the air below is nearly unbreathable. You find a moment's shade near a barrel, or under the overhang of a lifeboat, and eat again. More hardtack, more salted meat, a cup of water or beer. A few men gamble with dice or cards, using shells or scraps of cloth as wagers, too poor for coins, too bored to care about losing. Arguments flare, quickly and quietly, and are just as quickly suppressed. No one wants the captain's wrath, and no one wants to attract the notice of the quartermaster, who keeps a careful eye on all disputes. The afternoon brings more work, or sometimes, nothing at all. Days at sea can stretch into endless sameness, the horizon never changing, the wind never shifting. You might be put on watch, 2 hours staring at the horizon, eyes watering in the sun, searching for sails, for the plume of smoke, for anything that might break the monotony, or bring danger. If you are skilled, you help in the galley, stirring pots of soup or stew made from whatever can be spared. Beans, peas, a chunk of old bacon, a bit of biscuit crumbled to thicken the broth. Some days you help mend sails or carve wooden plugs for the endless leaks that appear in the hull. Some days you simply sit, scratching at bites, watching the sea, dreaming of land, or of a bed, or of a day without hunger or pain. As evening comes, the sun sinks low, and the temperature drops fast. Dinner is much like breakfast. More hardtack, more salt meat, maybe a ladle of stew, if the cook is generous, or if the last raid was successful, and the stores are good. After dinner, there may be singing, or just the low murmur of voices. Sometimes a story is told, but more often, the men save their energy for sleep. Before bed, there are more chores. The deck is swabbed again, weapons checked and cleaned, sails trimmed for the night. The captain may come among the men, silent or speaking, his face unreadable, his mood uncertain. You do not trust him, nor he you. On a pirate ship, loyalty is always a negotiation, always shifting with the wind. As darkness falls, you find your place below deck again. The same routine, boots off, coat folded, blanket pulled tight, one eye open for trouble. Around you, the sounds of sleep come slowly, breathing, snoring, the occasional cry or curse. You close your eyes, and the ship rocks you to sleep, never gently, always with the sharp reminder that you are far from land, far from safety, far from anything but the hard reality of another day survived. The romance of piracy fades with each breath. What remains is only the endurance, the endless patience required to live, day after day, in a world that promises little and delivers less. You dream, if you dream at all, of land, of trees and grass and fresh bread, of a bed that does not move, of silence that is not broken by the sea. But in the morning, you will wake again to the sound of boots, the smell of sweat and salt and tar, and the endless repetition of the same old day, aboard the same old ship. This is the truth of life aboard a pirate ship. Not glory, not riches, not freedom, but the quiet, stubborn will to survive, to endure, and to hope for something better, one slow, difficult morning at a time. And so as another night falls, and the ship drifts on the endless sea, you sleep, knowing that tomorrow will be just the same. Life on deck, chores, conflict, and the repetition of work morning, fades into the long, bright hours of day. And above deck, the world seems at first almost open, almost free. The sky stretches on, a dome of blue or grey or swirling cloud. The sea below shifts in slow, endless rhythm, sparkling or sullen, never quite the same, but always reminding you how small, how fragile, and how temporary a ship and her crew really are. Standing on the deck of a pirate ship, you feel the roughness of the boards under your feet, the sticky spots where tar oozes up between seams, the slippery tracks where sea spray and spilled grog have mixed and dried and mixed again. It is never truly clean, no matter how many buckets of salt water are sloshed across it, no matter how many hours are spent with brooms and brushes, scrubbing away the night's messes and the endless gifts of the sea. The air here is sharp, at least compared to the heavy, stale fog below. The wind carries salt, sometimes a taste of fish, sometimes the far-off hint of land that no one can quite place. But the wind is more than just weather. It is a reminder that everything you do here depends on forces beyond your control. The sails, patched and stained, and never quite as full as you'd like, slap and groan with every change in the breeze, and all eyes learn to watch them, even when no order has been given. There is no hour on a pirate ship when something does not need doing. The work is a kind of music, a beat that runs through every day, every hour, every body aboard. It begins with the simplest tasks, scrubbing decks, hauling lines, emptying slop buckets, tightening knots. Some men carry buckets, brimming with seawater, sloshing over boots and ankles, turning the deck to a shallow, swirling pond. Others chase after ropes that have come loose in the night, cursing the man who was supposed to secure them. Someone always has a knife out, scraping barnacles from the hull, carving a name in the wood, whittling a stick out of habit or boredom. Above, men in the rigging shout to one another, orders, jokes, curses. They move like shadows among the lines and sails, as comfortable on a rope as on solid ground, legs braced against the wind, fingers raw and call used from climbing, pulling, tying, and untangling. Each knot is its own tiny victory. Each patch, sewn onto a sail, each plug jammed into a leaking seam, is a quiet, necessary act that keeps the ship afloat, keeps the journey possible, keeps the dream of survival alive. But most of all, it is the monotony that defines life on deck. For every storm, every cannon fired, every wild moment of chase or fear, there are days, weeks, when nothing changes. You haul, you scrub, you wait, you listen for orders, or you try to avoid them. Some men sing, their voices blending with the wind, the songs always the same, old laments, bawdy jests, memories of landside life that grows fuzzier with every passing week. Some hum, some whistle, some curse under their breath, not really at anyone, just at the world that is always damp, always loud, always moving, and never ever quite safe. On deck, everyone finds their own rhythm, their own small territory. One man always sits near the bow, patching clothes and boots. Another sharpens knives against the rail, watching the horizon, as if waiting for something, anything, to break the sameness. A few cluster around the galley hatch, angling for a word with the cook, hoping for a scrap of bread, a sip of broth, a rumor of something better for dinner. The youngest keep to the edges, always watching, always ready to run an errand, always hungry for approval, or, at the very least, to be ignored, instead of blamed. It is not just the endless work, but the endless presence of others that wears you down. There is no privacy here, no escape from the gaze, or the temper of your crewmates. Arguments flare over nothing, a glance, a careless bump, a misunderstood word. Sometimes the fight is all in the eyes, a long, quiet duel of patience and pride. Sometimes it is loud and quick, a shove, a punch, a knife drawn, and then just as quickly sheathed. Punishments come swiftly, and never quite fairly. A man caught stealing grog might lose his ration for a week. A man who oversleeps is put on bilge duty. A man who raises his hand against the wrong officer finds himself trussed and flogged, his back striped with red, his eyes never meeting the captain's after. You learn, slowly, the language of conflict and compromise. You learn who to avoid, who to trust with your secrets, who to trade with when you need a favor. Every pirate ship is a web of alliances and rivalries, changing with every meal, every rumor, every night spent listening to someone else's snores. And always, there is the sound, the crack of sails in a gust, the thud of feet on boards, the rattle of chains, the distant hollow song of the sea against the hull. Sometimes in the heat of midday, everything goes still. The wind falls, the sails hang limp, the crew slumps into silence, their thoughts drifting back to land, to a woman's voice, to the taste of fruit, to a day without endless mindless labor. Food is never far from anyone's thoughts. The cook, a man with a permanent scowl and a missing thumb, is both feared and pitied. His work is a daily struggle against spoilage, against weevils, against the sheer monotony of salt pork, hard tack, and dried peas. He stirs his pots with the same spoon he uses to rap knuckles that get too close. His curses are legendary, but so is his inventiveness. One day he manages a stew with an onion, 3 potatoes, and the heel of a loaf found in a forgotten barrel. The next he produces a meal so foul even the rats turn up their noses. But everyone eats, because there is no other choice. Meals are taken on deck, standing or sitting wherever there is space. Sometimes a man eats alone, his eyes fixed on nothing. Sometimes the crew gathers in loose clusters, sharing stories or quietly trading bites of meat for sips of watered rum. There is little etiquette, no real ceremony, just the unspoken agreement that food is food, and hunger is the only master here. Between meals, the chores return. The sails are checked and mended, the guns cleaned and oiled, powder stores inspected, shot counted and recounted. The quartermaster moves among the men, his ledger always open, his eyes sharp for waste or theft. He is the keeper of order, the enforcer of rules, the judge in every petty dispute. His word is nearly law, second only to the captain, and he carries the authority of someone who knows every trick, every shortcut, every secret of life at sea. Sometimes a squall rolls in with no warning, and suddenly the monotony shatters. Orders are barked, men scramble to reef sails, to secure cargo, to brace for the storm's fury. Rain lashes faces and hands. The ship heels and bucks like a wild animal. Fear pulses through the crew, but also a strange, desperate exhilaration. For a few minutes, Everyone is alive in a way that is almost sweet. When the storm passes, the work resumes, and the boredom feels heavier than before. At other times, danger comes from within, a whisper of mutiny, a rumor of stolen loot, the slow sour build of resentment against a captain whose luck has run dry. Eyes are always watching, ears always listening. A careless word can ruin a man, or make him a hero, or both. The officers watch the men watch the officers, and everyone waits for the next change in fortune. And through it all, the sun crawls across the sky, hours blend together. The work never truly ends. Even in sleep, a sailor's muscles ache with remembered effort, his dreams full of knots and sails and the endless rolling sea. Sometimes, a ship is sighted on the horizon, a merchant, a navy frigate, or another pirate. The mood shifts instantly. Tension, hope, and fear mix in every heart. The men whisper of treasure, of battle, of glory or doom. More often than not, the ship is just another hungry crew, waving their own flag, hoping for something better than another week of salt pork and bad water. As evening falls, the pace slows, chores are finished, or put off until tomorrow. The cook doles out the last meal, and the men gather in groups, telling stories, singing old songs, gambling with dice and bones. Some carve trinkets from scraps of wood, others patch clothes, or write letters they will never send. The air is thick with smoke from pipes, and the low, steady drone of tired voices. Sometimes there is music, a fiddle, a drum, the soft thump of a hand against a barrel. Sometimes there is only silence, broken by the lap of waves and the groan of the hull. The officers retreat to their quarters. The captain paces the deck, silent and distant, or disappears below, leaving the crew to their own devices. The quartermaster makes his rounds one last time, checking stores, locking the armory, exchanging a word or a glare with every man he passes. And finally, as the sky darkens and the stars come out, strange, cold, endless, the crew drifts back below decks, returning to their hammocks, their nests of canvas and rope, their dreams of land and peace and quiet. But before sleep, there is always one last chore, a line to check, a bucket to empty, a silent promise made to yourself that tomorrow, perhaps, will be different. Yet in the morning, the same day will begin again, the same wind, the same waves, the same chores, the same aches and hungers. Life on deck is a cycle of repetition, of work that never ends, of men learning to survive together, despite every reason not to. There are moments, small, fleeting, when you glimpse beauty, a sunrise that paints the sky, in colors you have no words for, the sudden leap of a dolphin beside the hull, the laughter of a friend, the rare comfort of a full stomach, the quiet pride in a job well done. But mostly, life on deck is a slow grind, a test of patience, of endurance, of the simple stubborn refusal to give up. There are no legends here, no songs sung for heroes, only men, tired and hungry, working and waiting, hoping that someday, somehow, the wind will change and carry them home. And so the days blend together, scrubbing, patching, hauling, mending, eating, fighting, forgiving, and sleeping. The ship moves on, and you move with her, carried always forward, never quite sure where you are going, only that you must keep going, because to stop is to be left behind, to be lost, to be forgotten. This is life on deck, a life of repetition, of conflict, of quiet, stubborn hope. And as the stars wheel overhead, and the ship rocks gently on the open sea, you lie back, close your eyes, and let the sound of the waves carry you into sleep, knowing that tomorrow will bring the same world, the same chores, the same slow journey across the endless, restless sea. Food, hunger, and the rituals of eating at sea. Forget the gleaming banquet tables of Hollywood pirates and the boisterous toasts to buried treasure. Here, in the real world of life at sea, food is no feast, and hunger is never far behind. The truth of a pirate's rations is as unvarnished as the planks beneath your boots, unforgiving, repetitive, and never quite enough. From the earliest hour of dawn, as the ship stirs to life, the rumbling of stomachs becomes part of the rhythm of the day. It is a hunger that is never completely sated, a patient, gnawing presence that lives with you, beneath the noise of chores and the endless work of survival. You wake hungry, you fall asleep hungry. Sometimes, You dream of food you will never taste again. Each morning, the cook, a weathered soul with burned fingers and a voice like gravel, emerges from his tiny galley, stirring something in an iron pot blackened by thousands of meals. He is the least envied, most cursed, and often most feared man on the ship, not because he wields authority, but because he stands between you and starvation. He is not a chef, but a keeper of hope and a dealer in disappointment. His larder is always too small. His stores are always too low. His choices, such as they are rarely choices at all. In the earliest days after leaving port, meals might offer a fleeting sense of comfort, a hard loaf of bread perhaps, or a hunk of cheese, still smelling faintly of the market. There may be dried fruit, a wrinkled apple, even a handful of salted fish, dense and chewy, but still, for a moment, a taste of something alive. But quickly, almost before you realize it, the food begins to change. Fresh bread vanishes first, then the fruit, then the last slivers of cheese. The ship's biscuits, known as hardtack, become the staple, brown, square, hard enough to break teeth, and alive with weevils. By the end of the first week, you learn, through boredom and necessity, to tap each biscuit against the table before eating, knocking the weevils free. Some men eat them anyway, others, more fastidious, pick them out one by one, flicking the small white worms overboard with a tired sigh. Salted beef or pork comes next, a block of meat so dense and briny that it resists even the sharpest knife. If the cask has gone bad, the meat is green at the edges, and the strongest among you eats it anyway, pretending not to taste the rot. Some men soak it in beer or rum, hoping to soften the blow. Some scrape away the worst parts, tossing the rest to the sea. But food, no matter how foul, is precious at sea. You never know when the next barrel will be empty, or when the ship will go days without sight of land or prize. The cook makes do. He boils bones for soup, stretches beans with extra water, grinds dried peas into a mush, so bland that you begin to dream of the taste of anything else. Once a week, if you are lucky, there is a special treat, a lump of suet, a sliver of dried fruit, a cup of beer not yet sour. On holy days, there may be a raisin or two, or a rare sweet cake brought up from stores, hoarded for weeks and divided among the crew, in a ceremony as serious as any prayer. But most days, there is only sameness: hardtack in the morning, salt meat for dinner, pea soup or porridge for supper. Some men learn to like it, or at least to pretend. Most learn to live with it, as they live with the rocking of the ship and the slap of the wind. Just another discomfort, just another part of the long, slow ordeal. Water is no easier to come by. The barrels, filled in port, begin to sour, within days. The first cups are sweet and clear, the rest slowly turning brown and thick with floating things. You try not to look at too closely. Some men tie cloth over the mouth of their cup, hoping to strain away the worst of it. Others drink quick, pinching their nose, letting the lukewarm liquid burn its way down. Beer and rum are safer, but they are rationed closely. Too much drunkenness means trouble. Too little means mutiny. The quartermaster, the man who measures each ration, is both hated and needed. He keeps the peace with a sharp eye and a heavy hand, making sure that no man gets more than his share, and that no store is raided before its time. As the weeks pass, new challenges appear. The ship is always home to rats, cockroaches, and other uninvited guests. At first you scorn the idea of eating them, but hunger, like the sea, wears down every resistance. It is not uncommon to see a boy chasing a rat with a knife, or to find someone carefully cleaning and cooking a few cockroaches over a candle, their shells popping and sizzling, the smell sharp and strange. The older sailors tell stories of men in other ships, stranded for weeks, who ate leather boots or boiled rope, who chewed old canvas just to keep the ache away. In such company, a rat is a delicacy. You learn quietly and without shame to take what you can get. There are no grand meals on a pirate ship. There is no sitting at a table, no laughter over wine, no stories shared with a full mouth. Each man eats alone, even in a crowd. Meals are taken on the move, leaning against a rail, perched on a coil of rope, sitting on the deck with your back against a barrel. If it rains, you eat in the rain. If a wave washes the deck, you scramble to hold on to your food, cursing the sea as it steals your supper. Utensils are rare: a knife, perhaps, or a spoon carved from wood. Mostly, you eat with your hands, tearing meat, breaking bread, licking salt and grease from your fingers, because every grain counts. Sometimes, if the wind is kind and a fish is caught, there is a brief celebration. The cook cleans it, careful to save every scrap, and boils it with what little spice he has, perhaps a pinch of pepper, a dried sprig of thyme, a leftover onion that has not yet gone soft. For an hour, the ship smells almost like home. The men crowd around, eager for a taste, their faces softened by hope, but the meal is small, and the hunger remains. Once in a while, a prize ship is taken, cargo and stores are divided, and for a few days there is a bounty. Fresh bread, fruit, new barrels of salted meat, wheels of cheese, jars of preserves. The men eat with abandon, feasting and laughing, the memory of hunger drowned in joy. But such prizes are rare, and the feast is always short-lived. Within days, the food runs low, the rot sets in, and the old rations return. On the worst days, when storms rage and the world shrinks to a single heaving deck, food is forgotten. Men go without, their stomachs churning with fear or seasickness. The cook ties down his pots, the water barrels roll and crash, and no one eats until the wind settles. But the hunger always returns. It is patient. It waits through the chaos, through the calm, through every trial, and every brief joy. Some men waste away, growing thin and grey, their eyes hollow. Others grow hard, their bodies adapting, their spirits turning cold and quiet. Sickness is never far. The lack of fresh food brings scurvy, a disease that rots the gums, blackens the teeth, and turns old wounds into open sores. You learn to hide the signs, to keep working, to hope for a lemon or an orange from the next port. But most of all, you learn to endure. Food on a pirate ship is not nourishment, it is survival. Bare, simple, unadorned. At night, you lie in your hammock, or on the hard deck, listening to the snores and coughs of your shipmates, the creak of the hull, the endless whisper of the sea. Your stomach aches, but your body knows better than to complain. You dream of food, of meals long forgotten, a mother's stew, a market apple, a loaf of bread, still warm from the oven. But in the morning, there will only be hard tack, salt meat, a sip of water, and the promise that, with luck, there will be just enough to make it through another day. And so each meal becomes a ritual, a quiet act of patience, of hope, of faith in the slow, grinding persistence of life at sea. There is no glory in it, only the silent, shared understanding among men who know what it is to be hungry, and who choose, every day, to endure. This is the truth of eating at sea. No banquets, no celebration, no stories sung to the stars, only the steady, stubborn act of survival, meal by meal, day by day, under the watchful, indifferent gaze of the wide and empty ocean. Illness, injury, and the harsh reality of health at sea life. Aboard a pirate ship is often imagined as reckless and wild, men leaping from ropes, laughter ringing through the spray, wounds patched by hearty swigs of rum, and a bandana tied tight. But the true face of illness and injury at sea is quieter, far more persistent, and far less romantic. In the creaking dark of the lower decks, illness is a patient shadow, waiting in the corners, as steady and inescapable as the tide. At first, the health of a crew feels robust. Men board the ship strong from labor on land or in port, sun-browned, muscle-lean, eyes bright with hunger for prize and freedom. They lift heavy barrels with ease, wrestle each other on the sun-bleached deck, their voices rolling over the waves with bravado. But it takes only days, sometimes only hours, for the sea to begin its slow, grinding work on every body aboard. Sleep is never quite enough. The constant rocking of the ship makes rest a struggle. Hammocks swing, heads bump, and every sound, rat, cough, groan, curse, travels unbroken through the crowded air. The first signs of trouble are so common they barely register. A scratchy throat, a cough that lingers, eyes that water and sting with salt, hands chapped and bleeding from endless rope. A tooth aches in the night, a cut turns red at the edges, a bruise refuses to fade. Hygiene, such as it is primitive. There is no soap, save a sliver hoarded from port, or a scrap of lye for the captain and his officers. Most men wash with seawater, bracing against the cold, scrubbing at dirt that never quite goes. Clothes are rarely dry, never truly clean. Lice are inevitable, living in every seam, every fold, making themselves at home in hair and beards and blankets. Hands, never idle, become rough and cracked. Feet, always damp, blister and split. Even the smallest wounds become dangerous. A scratch from a nail, a rope burn, a stubbed toe left untreated. Salt water cleans, but it also dries and irritates, and the fine grit of sand, tar, and dirt rubs every wound raw. Beneath all this runs the unspoken knowledge that, at sea, illness is not just a nuisance, it is a threat. A single fever can spread through the crew with speed that terrifies. A cough becomes a chorus. A rash moves from one man's arm to the next. A shiver runs through hammocks at night. There is no doctor, no real one at least. The ship's surgeon, if there is one, is often a failed student, a barber, or simply the man with the strongest stomach. His tools are basic knives and saws, needles and twine, bottles of cheap rum for sterilizing and for numbing pain. He keeps his kit in a battered chest, blades blackened from use, bone saws dulled by too many hard jobs, hooks and clamps stained from old wounds. He knows how to pull a tooth, to drain an abscess, to cut away infected flesh, but he knows little about germs, nothing of antibiotics, and even less about the hidden workings of fever and plague. When sickness comes, it comes in many forms. Scurvy, the great enemy, appears after weeks without fresh fruit or green. Gums swell and bleed, teeth loosen and fall, old scars reopen, wounds that once healed now fester and refuse to close. Legs swell, eyes sink, and the body, so strong and proud, begins to wither. Day by day, there is little to be done. The cook boils old bones, searching for any scrap of nutrition. The surgeon looks for lemons or onions, but finds only the same dry stores. Some men try chewing rope or wood, hoping for something, anything, to push back the ache in their bones. Fevers are common, born of close quarters, bad food, and the relentless damp. A man grows pale, his skin hot and sticky, his eyes bright with confusion. He sweats through his blanket, mutters in his sleep, and turns away from food. If he is lucky, he recovers, thin and weak but alive. If not, he grows weaker still, his body racked with chills and sweats, his friends looking away, hoping not to be next. Other diseases thrive, dysentery, bloody, endless, leaving men too weak to stand. Pneumonia, creeping in with every cold night and wet morning. Consumption, tuberculosis, coughing blood into a rag, wasting away with each new sunrise. There are injuries too. The work is brutal. A slip on a wet deck means a broken arm, a smashed finger, a split lip. A fall from the rigging can kill outright, or leave a man shattered and groaning, his friends forced to decide whether to help or to look away. Blades are everywhere. Knives, axes, swords, each as likely to wound a friend as a foe. Fights break out over rations, over rumors, over the endless tension that grows in a space too small for so many hungry, angry men. When battle comes against another ship, a navy sloop, a merchantman armed in desperation, the wounds are worse. A musket ball tears through flesh, a splinter from a cannon blast drives deep into a leg or belly. The surgeon works in the open, men holding down the screaming patient, the blade biting deep, the saw moving fast and sure, the wound cauterized with hot iron or packed with rags. There is no anesthetic but rum, no comfort but the rough grip of a friend. Some live, many do not. Infection is relentless. A wound may seem minor, just a scratch or a slice, but in the days that follow, it grows angry and swollen, the skin turning red, then purple, then black. The fever rises, the man grows delirious, and the smell, unmistakable, sickly sweet, signals the end. Sometimes the surgeon cuts away the flesh, hoping to save the limb. Sometimes he saws through bone, the patient biting on a stick, his screams muffled by the wind. Sometimes there is nothing to be done but pray, or to wait. Death at sea is quick and quiet. There is no grave, no headstone, no comfort for those left behind. The body is wrapped in a blanket, weighed with a shot or a length of chain, and slid over the side. A few words are spoken, a prayer, perhaps, or a joke, or nothing at all. The sea takes back its own, and the ship sails on. For those who remain, illness and injury are reminders, not of heroism, but of how thin the line is between life and death, between luck and disaster. Superstition grows in the wake of sickness. Men blame the weather, the ship, the color of the sky at sunset, the cry of gulls, a dream from the night before. Some refuse to whistle, believing it calls the wind and with it, misfortune. Others touch wood or iron, carry a lucky charm, spit over the rail for luck. The surgeon, for all his flaws, becomes a figure of hope and fear. Some men visit him for every ache, others avoid him, afraid that to be seen as weak is to be marked for death. There are those who cope with humor, jokes about peg legs, wooden teeth, empty sleeves tied at the shoulder. They laugh, because the alternative is to weep, or to rage, or to give in to despair. Alcohol is the ever-present medicine. Rum dulls the ache of wounds, eases the pain of a lost limb, helps men forget the sight of blood or the sound of a friend's last breath. Too much though, and the body weakens, the mind grows clouded, and the risk of accident or fight grows. Even the officers are not immune. The captain's cough is watched by all. The quartermaster's limp becomes the subject of rumor. No man is so high, or so lucky, that illness will not find him. But through all this, work continues. A man with a fever still hauls lines, if he can. A man with a broken finger still climbs the rigging, hand wrapped in dirty rags, teeth clenched in silent pain. There is no rest at sea, no respite, no chance to recover, unless the ship finds port, or unless the man finds himself among the lucky few whose bodies are stronger than their suffering. Hope, when it comes in small forms. A lemon found in a captured cargo, shared among the sick, a barrel of onions or potatoes, a miracle of freshness, a taste of life before the sea, a fair wind, a break in the weather, a chance to dry blankets and clothes on deck, to feel the sun and forget, for a moment, the damp and the darkness below. There are quiet heroes, the friend who shares his blanket, the old hand who checks a fevered brow at midnight, the cook who stirs extra broth for the man who cannot chew. Most of all, there is the slow, stubborn endurance of every man aboard. You learn quickly, or not at all, to live with pain. You learn not to complain, for there is always someone worse off, always a harder story, always a lesson in humility whispered by the sea itself. At the end of each day, as the sun sets in colors you never saw on land, as the sky darkens and the ship settles into its nighttime rhythm, the crew finds what peace it can. Some pray, quiet words, half-remembered, spoken into the wind. Some drink, some joke, some simply close their eyes and hope for a dream of home. Tomorrow, there will be more wounds, more aches, more coughs. Tomorrow, there will be more empty hammocks, more men leaning on rails, eyes hollow, faces drawn. But tomorrow, too, there will be work, and laughter, and the unbroken chain of survival that binds every man to his place, his purpose, his hope for land, for food, for rest. The sea does not care for the pain of men. It is vast and patient, swallowing both hero and coward, healer and wounded alike. But those who live through illness, through injury, through the slow, silent struggle of health at sea, remember, life is not made glorious by the absence of pain, but by the strength to endure it. Together, in the shadow of the sails, beneath the wide and indifferent sky. And so, night after night, the ship drifts on, its crew battered and scarred, but alive, each man a testament to the quiet, relentless courage that defines not just pirates, but all those who have ever faced the long, uncertain voyage of life itself. Loneliness, boredom, and the hidden world within. If the wind and the waves, the hunger and the wounds, were not enough to test a man's resolve, then there was the deeper, quieter challenge. The slow passage of empty hours, the vastness of the sea mirrored by the vastness within. Out here, beyond the horizon, every pirate found himself face to face with something harder to bear than hunger or cold. Himself. Aboard a pirate ship, there is no privacy, no solitude in the usual sense. Yet, paradoxically, it is a life marked by a certain kind of loneliness, one that seeps in between the jokes and jibes, the busy hours and the long watches. The crowding is constant, bodies pressed together below deck, voices overlapping, shoulders jostling at the mess. Yet the mind, left untended, wanders far beyond the reach of ship and sea, searching for something to break the monotony. Boredom at sea is a special kind. It is not the simple, restless idleness of a child waiting for dinner, nor the impatient tapping of a foot in a line. It is a boredom that seeps into the bones, a dullness that is not quite pain, but never truly leaves. The sameness is overwhelming. Every day brings the same chores, the same faces, the same jokes and arguments, the same patch of sky that never seems to change, the same horizon, forever out of reach. There are hours, sometimes days, when the sea is flat, and the wind is slack, when the ship drifts and the crew's world shrinks to the size of the deck and the gloom below. No ships appear on the horizon, no storms, no dolphins, no seabirds to break the stillness, just the creak of wood, the slap of loose lines, the slow drip of condensation from the beams. It is then that men become restless, irritable. The smallest slights grow large, a missing shirt, a borrowed knife not returned, a careless word that lingers. Quarrels break out over nothing, sometimes dissolving in laughter, sometimes in violence. The quartermaster is busiest in these times, settling disputes, listening to complaints, doling out punishment, or more often, simply telling everyone to be quiet and wait. Each man finds his own way of filling the void. Some carve bits of wood into charms or toys, whittling away hours and shaping little gifts for friends or tokens to keep luck close. Some stitch their clothes, patching and repatching, a slow, repetitive labor that soothes more than it accomplishes. Some gamble, dice thrown on a barrel-head, cards scuffed and greasy from 100 hands, stakes as low as a sliver of cheese, or a swig of grog. A few try to read, poring over a book or a letter long memorized, their lips moving silently, mouthing the words like a prayer. Most simply sit, watching the water slide past, letting the mind wander wherever it will. In the long quiet, men talk more than they mean to. They tell stories, not just of battles or escapes, but of home, a mother's kitchen, a lost sweetheart, a night in a warm bed, a morning with bread and fresh butter. The stories are half remembered, half invented, but they bind the crew together, a fragile shield against the boredom and the sadness that grows in the heart. Dreams, too, become more vivid at sea. Some men confess them in the dark, lying in hammocks, their voices barely louder than the sigh of the ship. I dreamt I was home last night, eating cherries with my little brother, or I saw my father again, and he forgave me for leaving. These dreams are both comfort and curse, a taste of what was lost, a reminder that land is far away and may never be seen again. Others dream of the future. If I get back, I'll buy a farm, or I'll open a tavern, never see the sea again. These dreams become promises, repeated so often that they seem almost true, almost within reach. But the sea has a way of stealing hope, as well as time. The longer the ship stays out, the more muted the laughter becomes. The stories get shorter, the silences longer, eyes grow hollow, voices softer, tempers quicker to flare, and just as quick to fade. Some men give in to the silence. They speak less, drift through the days like ghosts, doing what must be done but no more. They sit alone at meals, sleep alone if they can. Their thoughts a private ocean, none can cross. A few, desperate for distraction, pick fights, break things, challenge the authority of the captain or the quartermaster. Such men rarely last long. Punishment is swift, sometimes brutal, always public. Discipline in these times is not just about order, but about protecting the fragile peace of men living too close, with too little, for too long. Alcohol is both friend and foe in these lonely hours. A little brings laughter, the loosening of tongues, the warmth of shared song. Too much, and it brings trouble, words that cannot be unsaid, blows that cannot be taken back, regret that lingers long after the head clears. The officers know this, and ration the rum carefully. Yet even so, bottles appear, hidden and hoarded, traded for favors or secrets, always present, always tempting. At night, the loneliness sharpens. Lying in your hammock, the sounds of the ship blend into a gentle lullaby, the creak of beams, the sigh of the hull, the distant eternal hush of the ocean itself. But the mind does not rest. It drifts to the past, to regrets and wishes, to the people left behind. You remember faces, the way your sister laughed, the way your dog ran to greet you, the sound of a church bell ringing through an ordinary Sunday. You think, too, of all that brought you here, a debt unpaid, a crime forgiven by distance, a hope for fortune, or just the restless urge to see what lay beyond the next hill, the next wave, and sometimes in the long middle of the night, you wonder if it was worth it. The old hands say that every man must find a way to make peace with the sea, or the sea will never let him rest. Some find solace in routine. They polish their knife until it shines, fold their shirt the same way each night, say a silent prayer before sleep. Some take comfort in friendship, an arm around a shoulder, a joke shared, a secret kept. Others find comfort in the sea itself. They stand at the rail, staring into the endless dark, letting the wind wash over them, the stars so bright and so many that it feels, for a moment, like the world is still new, still full of possibility. The greatest challenge, perhaps, is to remember yourself, to remember that you are not only a pirate, not only a number in the crew, but a person with a story, a past, and a future beyond the horizon. The young struggle most. They long for excitement, for adventure, for something to break the sameness. They gamble and fight, make wild boasts, carve their names into the mast, determined not to be forgotten. They are quick to anger, quick to forgive, quick to fall in love with the idea of life at sea, and just as quick to tire of it, to regret, to dream of land. The old hands, those who have sailed too long to remember any other life, are quieter. They know the cost of every mile, every storm, every empty day. They have seen friends lost to the sea, to the rope, to the slow wasting of time. Their laughter is softer, their stories less grand, their hopes more modest. A dry bed, a fair share, a chance to die with boots on. Yet, for all the hardship, there is a strange, stubborn pride in surviving the loneliness, the boredom, the endless sameness. Each day endured is a victory, a small private triumph over despair. There are moments, too, of genuine beauty, a sunrise so clear and golden that it silences even the most jaded heart, a night so calm that the stars reflect perfectly on the water, as if the world has been turned upside down, a sudden pod of dolphins leaping alongside, a rainbow after a storm, the sweet taste of fresh rainwater collected in the sail. In these moments, the crew gathers together, their differences forgotten. For a few minutes, the loneliness lifts, replaced by a quiet awe, a sense of connection to each other, to the world, to the mystery of the sea. Stories are born in these moments, stories that will be told and retold, growing with each telling, becoming legends that comfort and bind the crew long after the memory of hardship has faded. And so the days pass, slow and alike, each marked by the same chores, the same hunger, the same longing. Loneliness and boredom are the sea's greatest weapons, but also her greatest teachers. For those who survive them, there is a strength that cannot be taken away, a resilience born of enduring not just the world but the world within. And at the end of each day, as the ship rocks gently in the cradle of the waves, the crew drifts into uneasy sleep, their minds alive with dreams, of home, of fortune, of freedom, of land somewhere just beyond the edge of the sky. Tomorrow will bring more of the same, but for tonight, there is rest, a small blessing, hard-won and deeply cherished, beneath the silent, indifferent stars. Discipline, punishment, and the price of order at sea, if hunger, sickness, and loneliness marked the slow suffering of pirate life. The matter of discipline, the way men kept order and survived together, was the constant, invisible hand that shaped every day. It was not the wild freedom of stories or songs, nor the wild anarchy of lawless souls living only for themselves. Instead, it was a world governed by rules, some written, some whispered, and all enforced with the sharp edge of necessity. To understand this world, drift back to the reality of a ship alone on the ocean, filled with dozens or even hundreds of men, each one strong-willed, desperate, and often dangerous. There is no easy escape, no walking away from a quarrel or an injustice, no hiding from your enemies or your mistakes. The only way a ship survives is by holding itself together, through discipline, through law, through the slow, patient labor of justice, meted out one day, one infraction, one decision at a time. Discipline at sea begins with the code. On most pirate ships, this is not the code of kings and governors, nor the slow, intricate law of courts and judges. It is a code written in sweat and salt, in the memory of betrayals, and the desperate lessons of voyages gone wrong. It is spoken aloud at the beginning of every journey, each man agreeing to it before taking his place on the crew. The code governs every aspect of life, how plunder is divided, who stands watch and when, what weapons may be carried, what share belongs to the captain, and what to the cook. But most importantly, it lays out the crimes and their punishments, the limits of freedom, the price of every act. Beneath the sun and the wind, these rules are both shield and sword. Some crimes are obvious: stealing from your mates, hiding gold, cheating at dice, striking an officer, sleeping through your watch. Others are subtler: sowing dissent, spreading panic, muttering rumors that turn men against each other. Still others are simply what a captain, or a council of the crew says they are: new dangers, new threats, new needs, all shaping the law day by day. But no matter the crime, the punishment is never a matter of debate for long. At sea, justice must be swift. Delay brings more than discontent. It brings danger, breeds mutiny, undermines the fragile peace that keeps the ship afloat. Punishments, too, are many and memorable. The most common is the lash, the cat o' nine tails, a whip of rope or leather, knotted and stained by years of use. A man found guilty stands stripped to the waist at the mainmast, his back exposed to the crew and the sky. The boatswain, or sometimes the quartermaster himself, delivers the blows, each stroke a mark of shame, of pain, of memory. The lash is not always a matter of anger. Sometimes it is simply ritual. The strokes are counted aloud, the crew forced to watch, to bear witness. Some men grit their teeth and refuse to cry out. Others scream or weep, or collapse after the first few. Afterwards, a friend brings water, or a rag soaked in rum, to wash the blood from the stripes. If the wounds fester, the ship's surgeon will cut away the rot, or pack the flesh with salt, or leave the man to heal as best he can. For greater crimes, mutiny, murder or betrayal, the punishment is exile, or death. Sometimes the guilty is marooned, left on a barren island with a pistol, a flask of water, and the mercy of fate. Sometimes he is hanged from the yardarm, his body left swinging above the deck as a warning. Sometimes, if the crew is angry enough, punishment is immediate and final: a knife in the dark, a body pushed overboard, and the crime never spoken of again. But these are the extremes. Most discipline is quieter, less dramatic, but just as powerful. A man caught cheating at dice might lose his winnings, or his next meal. A sailor found asleep on watch might be put in the bilge, forced to pump water for hours, or set to scrub the deck until his hands bleed. A thief may have his head shaved, a mark of disgrace that lingers long after the bruises fade. Punishment is public, always. The lesson is not just for the guilty, but for every eye that watches, every mind that wonders what might happen if they too break the code. Yet, for all its harshness, pirate discipline is strangely democratic. The code is agreed upon by all. Officers are chosen by the men, or at least by the loudest and strongest among them. The captain rules not by birthright, but by consent, by skill, by the willingness of the crew to follow. If he loses their trust, if his luck runs out, he can be replaced, voted out, cast aside, sometimes even set adrift himself. Justice is often delivered by council, officers, quartermaster, and sometimes the crew as a whole. The accused is given a chance to speak, to defend, to call on friends or witnesses. Sometimes this is fair, sometimes not. Sometimes the outcome is decided before a word is said, the crime already certain in the minds of those with the most to lose. But the process itself is a shield. It binds the crew together, gives them a sense of order in a world that is otherwise chaos. It is, in its way, a kind of family, a hard, unforgiving one, but a family nonetheless. And beneath it all lies the power of fear. Fear is the silent captain of every pirate ship. Fear of the captain's wrath, of the quartermaster's eye, of the lash, of the rope, of the sea itself. Fear of being left behind, of losing your share, of failing in the eyes of men who ask only that you do your part. Some men try to escape fear with bravado, with laughter, with songs sung too loud and too late at night. Some retreat into silence, into obedience, into the careful, quiet hope that today will not be their turn. Others push back, questioning orders, testing limits, whispering in corners about what might happen if only enough men stood together, if only the rules could be changed, If only a new captain could be found. These whispers are dangerous, and everyone knows it. Mutiny is the most feared crime of all, the slow creeping sense that the order of things might unravel, that the ship might descend into chaos, that every man must choose sides before it is too late. When mutiny is suspected, the officers act quickly. Loyalty is tested, gifts are given, an extra ration, a promise, a share of the next prize. Suspected ringleaders are isolated, given the hardest jobs, watched day and night. If proof is found, a letter, a whispered promise, a stolen weapon, then justice is swift and without mercy. Yet, not every captain rules with an iron fist. Some understand that discipline, to last, must be more than punishment. It must be respect, earned and kept, day after day, through fairness, through skill, through the hard, quiet courage of leading by example. These captains are rare, but their ships are strong. The men follow not because they fear, but because they trust. Trust that their share will be fair, that their voices will be heard, that their lives matter as much as any order or ambition. Such ships are the envy of every other crew. They are the ones that last, that grow rich, that become legends not for their cruelty, but for their strange, improbable unity. Discipline is never just about law, it is about power. Who has it? Who wants it? Who deserves it? The quartermaster is the keeper of this balance. He is both judge and enforcer, trusted by the men to stand between them and the captain, to speak for the crew, to punish fairly, to listen, and to decide. His power is always at risk. Lose the crew's trust, and he too can be replaced, or worse. Discipline is also about habit, the routines of the day, the rituals of meal and watch, the slow, steady repetition of chores and rest and laughter and anger. Order is kept, not just by threat, but by the comfort of knowing what comes next, by the feeling that someone, somewhere, has a plan. But even the best discipline cannot erase the wildness of the sea, or the wildness in the hearts of men set free from the rules of land. Tempers flare, alliances shift, secrets are kept and revealed, trust is broken and rebuilt. Day after day, at night, after punishment is dealt, the ship grows quiet. Men nurse wounds, physical and otherwise. Some gather in small groups, whispering their anger, their fear, their hope for a better tomorrow. Others lie awake, staring at the beams above, listening to the sigh of the sea, thinking of the line they almost crossed, or the line they might cross next time. Over weeks and months, the scars of punishment add up. Backs bear the marks of the lash, faces the broken noses and black eyes of too many fights. But there is also pride. The man who has survived the rope's end, the bilge, the shame of a shaved head, stands taller for having endured. For every act of discipline, there is an act of forgiveness, quiet, unspoken, but real. A friend brings water to a punished man. A joke is shared to lighten the mood. A new chance is given. A new trust slowly built. Sometimes, when things go wrong, the crew must come together to decide what to do. A storm tears the sails. A prize is lost. Food runs short. Blame is passed around. Arguments flare. But in the end, the only way forward is together. Discipline at sea is not just punishment. It is the art of survival. The slow, careful work of keeping order, where chaos is always one bad day away. It is the quiet, persistent effort to make a home out of a prison, a family out of strangers, a community out of outcasts and wanderers and men with nowhere else to go. It is imperfect, often cruel, sometimes unfair, but it is also, at its best, a kind of grace, a chance to begin again, to find a place, to learn the hardest lesson of all, that in a world without mercy, men must find a way to show mercy to each other, or be lost. As the ship drifts on, as the days blur together, as the scars of punishment and the hope of order shape every life aboard, one truth remains: freedom at sea was never free. It was paid for, every day, in blood, in sweat, in the endless necessary work of discipline, and in the quiet, after the storm, in the moments between order and chaos. The crew finds what comfort it can, holding to the code, to the rules, to the fragile, hard-won peace that is all that stands between them and the endless, hungry sea. Weather, storms, and the relentless uncertainty of the sea. Long before any pirate dreamed of riches, or of outwitting a navy frigate, or of dancing in the lantern glow of a Caribbean tavern, he dreamed, or more often dreaded, the mood of the sea. For all the stories told in smoky inns and around the galley fire, none ever matched the slow, consuming power of the weather. In truth, every pirate's greatest enemy was not a rival crew, not a vengeful captain, not even the navy itself, but the wild, untamable sky and the restless ocean that never ever slept. Every day at sea began and ended with the sky, a study in watching, in patience, in small anxieties. You wake before the dawn, and already someone is at the rail, scanning the horizon, reading the shifting patterns of cloud and breeze. The air is damp and heavy, or sharp and bracing, or still as death. You learn, if you survive, to taste the weather in the back of your throat, to feel its moods in your bones, to hear its warnings in the groan of the rigging and the sigh of the hull. Sometimes the days are gentle, endless blue above and below, the wind soft, the sun kind, the sea like a mirror. These are days of uneasy peace, days when the chores seem lighter, the work slower, the crew more patient, more apt to hum or whistle as they mend a line or patch a sail. The heat builds through the afternoon, making every plank hot beneath your bare feet, until at last the sun slips into the sea and the air cools, the colors shifting from gold to purple to the dark velvet of night. But even on these days, the weather is a silent promise, a reminder that it can and will change in a moment. Clouds gather on the horizon, a line of gray or black, moving with deceptive speed. A sudden gust rips the hat from your head, slaps the sails to life, sets the ship to rolling in a way that wakes every muscle, every old bruise. The officers watch the sky with narrow eyes. The captain stands at the helm, his hands tight on the wheel, his mouth a thin line. He says little, but everyone senses the change. The way the crew moves a little faster, a little quieter, the way the deck is cleared, and the sails trimmed, the way each man checks and rechecks the lines, ties and reties the knots, glances up at the sky, then down at his own hands. Aboard a pirate ship, there is no shelter from the weather. There is only what you bring with you, your coat, your hat, your patience, your luck. Below decks, it is never truly dry. Rain seeps through every crack, drips from the beams, pools on the boards, turns blankets to sodden rags and boots to swollen heavy weights. Above, the wind rises. It whistles through the rigging, snaps the flags, rattles the blocks and tackles, shakes every man to his core. Sometimes the rain comes with it, a driving, relentless torrent that blinds the eyes, soaks the skin, chills the bones. There are no umbrellas, no oilskins for the common sailor. You huddle in your coat, turn your face from the wind, grit your teeth, and keep working. The cold settles in your hands, stiffens your fingers, until even the simplest task, hauling a line, tying a knot, raising a cup to your lips, becomes a test of will. And then there are the storms. A storm at sea is not simply an inconvenience, not a story to be told later with laughter and bravado. It is a living thing, angry, hungry, unpredictable. It comes on sudden, sometimes with warning, sometimes with none at all. The air grows still, heavy, pressing against your chest, making it hard to breathe. The sea turns dark, the horizon closing in, the sky lowering until it feels as though the world is shrinking, crushing the ship, and all aboard. The first wind comes with a howl, flinging spray and foam across the deck, bending the masts, making the sails shudder and snap like the wings of some giant bird. Men scramble to reef the sails, climbing the rigging slick with rain, hands numb, eyes wide with fear and concentration. The boatswain bellows orders, the captain's voice cuts through the roar, the crew moves as one, each man trusting the others, trusting the ship, trusting, in the end, that luck will hold. Below decks, the world is chaos. The cargo shifts and groans, barrels roll and slam into the walls, water leaks and pours in a dozen places. The lanterns swing wildly, casting wild shadows, making every face look strange, every fear larger than life. You cling to whatever is nearest, a beam, a barrel, a friend, praying in words you barely remember, in the language of land and childhood. The noise is unimaginable. The shriek of the wind, the thunder of waves smashing against the hull, the crash of the mainmast as it bows and strains. Every muscle is awake, every nerve alive, every sense screaming for survival. The ship rises, rises, rises on the back of a giant wave, then plunges, drops, slams into the trough below, sending men sprawling, gear flying, hope itself battered and bruised. You hear the splinter of wood, the snap of rope, the sharp, terrified cry of a man swept overboard, gone in an instant, his life swallowed by the storm, his name left to be whispered only in the uneasy quiet that follows. Time slows and stretches. A minute feels like an hour like a lifetime. The cold is everywhere, but you do not feel it. The fear is everywhere, and you feel nothing else. Orders are shouted, obeyed, forgotten, repeated. A mast splits, a sail tears, a spar swings wild, catches a man across the back, throws him to the deck, motionless. No one stops. There is no stopping, only surviving. At the height of the storm, there is only the sea, only the sky, only the tiny ship, battered, thrown, battered again. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it ends. The wind dies, the rain slows, then stops. The clouds break, sunlight glimmers through, dazzling, impossible, almost holy. The ship settles, rocks gently, then more gently, as if exhausted by the effort. The crew emerges, one by one, faces pale, eyes hollow, hands trembling. They count the living, mark the dead, patch the wounds, begin the slow, aching work of repair. There are broken bones to set, torn sails to mend, water to be pumped from the bilge, bruises and cuts to be cleaned and bound. The dead are wrapped in their blankets, a prayer said, a memory shared, their bodies given to the sea, the silence only broken by the sob of a friend, the quiet curse of a survivor. In the days that follow, the ship feels changed, a little smaller, a little older, the laughter slower to return. The men are quieter, more careful, more aware of their own fragility. Some tell stories of storms survived, of friends lost, of moments when all seemed lost, and yet, somehow, life went on. Others say nothing, working in silence, eyes fixed on the horizon, hope a fragile thing held close, and never spoken aloud. But even on calm days, the weather is never forgotten. Every change in wind, every shift in cloud, every new color in the sky, is noted, discussed, worried over. Superstitions grow, a red sky at morning, sailor take warning. A ring around the moon, a storm is coming. No whistling on deck, for it calls the wind. Charms are tied to the rigging, a coin nailed to the mast, a lock of hair from a sweetheart, a small carved figure hung near the wheel. Prayers are said, offerings made, small rituals repeated day after day, each man hoping to ward off the next storm, to keep luck on his side, to survive just one more voyage. Sometimes, the weather turns strange. A fog descends, thick as wool, muffling every sound, making the world shrink to the length of the ship. The crew moves slow, voices soft, eyes straining for danger that cannot be seen. In fog, time itself seems to stop. The sun is a pale ghost, the sea a silent mirror, the ship a drifting island in a world without end. There are stories told of ships lost in fog, never seen again, of ghostly sails that appear and vanish, of voices heard on the wind, of things best left unspoken. Other times, the heat is the enemy. The sun rises high, the air still as death, the deck burning underfoot, sweat pours from every man, water runs low, tempers flare, the food spoils faster, the rats grow bold, the men grow sluggish, sick, short of breath. In the doldrums, days pass without wind, the ship a floating prison, hope melting with every hour. Men pray for wind, for rain, for anything to break the suffocating stillness. There is no escape from the weather, only endurance, only the hope that tomorrow will be kinder. But there are moments too, of breathtaking beauty. A night sky so clear, so full of stars, that it feels as if the heavens have opened. A rainbow after a storm, vivid and perfect, drawing every eye, and lifting every heart. A breeze that rises, just as the crew begins to despair, filling the sails, sending the ship forward, hope restored. These moments are treasured, held close, remembered, and retold in the long hard days that follow. And so through weather fair and foul, the ship sails on. The crew learns,
slowly, painfully, to live with the uncertainty, to respect the sea, to fear, and to love the sky. For every storm survived, there is a scar, a broken mast, a lost friend, a memory that lingers in the mind long after the bruises have healed. But for every gentle day, every safe harbor reached, there is a gratitude deeper than words, a sense of wonder, a humility before the power of the world, a quiet pride in having endured. The weather is both enemy and friend, both threat and blessing. It is the great equalizer, the reminder that, no matter how bold or cunning or lucky a pirate may be, he is always at the mercy of forces far beyond his control. In the end, it is not gold or glory that marks a sailor, but the memory of the sky, the feel of the wind, the song of the waves, the knowledge that he has faced the storm, and for one more day, survived. And so, the endless uncertainty of the sea becomes in time, a kind of faith, a belief that whatever comes you will meet it, endure it, and tell its story beneath the quiet, watchful sky.
Social life, friendship, and conflict. On a pirate ship, if the sea was the greatest test, the men beside you were the next. To survive the ocean's storms and its moods, a pirate first had to learn to live among other pirates, men as flawed, wild, lonely, and stubborn as the sea itself. Beneath the battered sails and the ever-watchful sky, a pirate ship was its own society, a world afloat, governed by its own unwritten rules, rhythms, and rituals. No man lived in isolation. Every day was spent shoulder to shoulder, voice to voice, heart to heart, for better or for worse, the rhythm of community. From the moment a new recruit climbed aboard, he entered a brotherhood, unlike any on land. The first lesson was simple. Privacy was a luxury lost at sea. There were no quiet rooms, no doors to close, no space to be alone unless you claimed it with your silence, your stare, your reputation. Every morning began together. The shuffling rise of bodies below deck, the communal meal, hardtack and salt meat, passed from hand to hand. The muted conversation, or, some mornings, total silence, all marked the shared start of another day. Men dressed side by side, tended wounds in the open, laughed and cursed, and sang within arm's reach of each other. Even dreams became public, whispered in the darkness, or shouted in fear from restless sleep. In every sense, each man's life was woven into the fabric of his crewmates, the threads tangled and twisted by time and circumstance. The social hierarchy, the pirate world was not without its order. While pirates liked to speak of freedom, of equality, every ship had its leaders, its followers, its outcasts. The captain was the most obvious authority, but his power depended on the consent of the crew. A captain could be challenged, replaced, even abandoned if he lost their trust, or led too poorly. His word was law only as long as it served the crew's interests. Respect was earned daily, by fairness in dividing spoils, by wisdom in steering clear of danger, by courage in facing storms and enemy ships. The quartermaster was often just as powerful, acting as the voice of the men. He settled disputes, kept track of supplies and shares, enforced discipline, and could, if the crew willed it, call for a new captain to be chosen. Officers, the boatswain, gunner, carpenter, and others, each held their own domains, responsible for the smooth working of ship and crew. The most skilled could earn the respect and envy of their peers. The least were quickly found out and pushed aside. But below the officers, the lines blurred. Men were judged by their skill, their reliability, their humor, their luck. The strongest might bully the weakest, but just as often, the cleverest would rise, making friends or striking deals that earned them a measure of safety and standing. Some ships were more equal than others. On the best, all men voted, all had a say in decisions. On others, an iron-handed captain or quartermaster could rule with fear and favor. A man's place was never fixed. A single act, bravery in a fight, cleverness in a crisis, generosity with a share, could change his fortunes in a day. The closeness of crowded life day after day, the crew lived pressed together, eating, working, sleeping, enduring together whatever the sea offered up. Below deck, hammocks swung close enough that men could feel the warmth of each other's breath. Snores, murmured prayers, coughs, the sound of teeth grinding. There was no escaping the evidence of other lives so close, so constant. Arguments would break out over a man's feet straying into another's hammock, or over a blanket claimed by two. On deck, the work brought men together in cooperation and competition. Hauling lines, patching sails, manning the guns, every task demanded coordination, trust, and patience. Even on days when patience was in short supply, men shared jokes, traded news, compared old scars, sang songs, sometimes bawdy, sometimes soft and mournful. A favorite song could sweep the deck, voices rising and falling, a momentary respite from the endless labor and sameness of sea life. Laughter in such conditions was precious, both a relief and a necessity. A well-timed jest could turn anger aside, could make the difference between a fist fight and a grin. Some men made a living out of laughter, natural storytellers, mimics, tricksters who lightened the mood and bought themselves goodwill with every tale, arguments and tensions. But where men live close, friction is inevitable. Small grievances grew large in the confined space of a ship: a stolen shirt, a missing knife, a careless insult, a disputed hand of cards, a share of food that seemed too small. Old quarrels smoldered for weeks, then flared over nothing. Sometimes, a man would wait until the deck was dark, the night quiet, to voice his anger, sometimes with words, sometimes with fists, sometimes with a knife. Fights were not rare. The quartermaster or a pair of friends might step in to separate the combatants, or let them settle it themselves, provided no one was killed or badly hurt. The unwritten rule was clear: keep the peace, but do not let disrespect stand. Sometimes, a feud could last a whole voyage, with pranks, whispered insults, and small acts of sabotage, ropes untied, boots misplaced, water spilled on a blanket. But just as often, anger would burn out as quickly as it began. A man who stood his ground, who did not back down, might find new respect. A man who apologized, truly, and in front of witnesses, might win forgiveness. The code of pirates was harsh but fair. You could fight, but you could not murder. A man who killed out of anger risked more than punishment. He risked the wrath and suspicion of the entire crew, friendship and loyalty. Despite or perhaps because of the constant friction, true friendships could and did form. Shared hardship was a powerful bond. Two men who survived a storm together, or fought back to back in a boarding, or helped each other through illness, became brothers in all but blood. These friendships were simple and direct: a shared mug of water, a story swapped on watch, a blanket divided on a cold night. Each small kindness built trust, built memory. Some men formed tighter cliques, little groups who ate together, worked together, watched out for each other. They might share loot, plan mischief, defend each other in arguments, or band together against a bully or an unpopular officer. Others were more solitary, keeping their own counsel, but even these needed someone to talk to in the end. A quiet man might find a single confidant, a friend who listened without judgment, who offered advice or simply sat beside him, saying nothing at all. Occasionally, a friendship would become something more: a deep, loyal partnership that survived quarrels and distance, a bond strong enough to outlast even the sea. Pirate ships, for all their danger, could foster a kind of community unknown on land. Men found family among strangers, loyalty among outcasts, meaning in a world that had offered them little before. Storytelling and shared history. In the long hours between storms, in the quiet after the day's work, men told stories. Some were true, most were not. All served a purpose. There were tales of former captains, mad, brave, cruel or clever, tales of the greatest prizes ever taken, of ships sunk, of escapes so narrow they left a man shaking with the telling. Stories were traded like coins. Let me tell you of the time we sailed into Nassau with the Navy on our tail. Did you ever hear of the ghost ship that sails these waters on moonless nights? My old captain, he was hanged in Tortuga, but not before he cursed the judge with a storm so fierce it sank the courthouse. Some men told tales of home, of lives before the sea, a mother's kitchen, a lost lover, a street they had not seen in years. These stories softened the edges, drew laughter or tears, reminded everyone of the world beyond the horizon. Songs accompanied the stories, old and new, in every language the crew had brought with them. Singing passed the time, soothed the nerves, knit the crew together. Sometimes, new stories were born on the spot.
A clever man could turn the day's events into a ballad or a jest, making light of hardship, deflating anger, bringing the crew together in shared laughter, games, gambling, and passing the time. Pirate life was not all work, all tension. Wherever men gather, games appear, ways to pass the hours, to test luck, to win a little extra food or rum. Dice were the most common, their click and clatter a familiar sound on any voyage. Cards too, though a full deck was rare and often made up from scraps and memory. Gambling was constant, the stakes often small but sometimes growing dangerously high. A man might wager his ration of water, his share of loot, his boots, even his hammock. Disputes over games were frequent, and could lead to more serious quarrels. Cheating was punished harshly, but suspicion alone could ruin a man's reputation. Other games were less dangerous: arm wrestling, foot races, riddles, contests of song or wit. In the best of times, the crew found ways to celebrate: a birthday, a successful raid, a day of fair weather after weeks of storms. Any excuse would do for a little extra food, a round of songs, a chance to dance or tell stories late into the night. Jealousy, romance and secrets. On some ships, women sailed disguised, or openly, carving out a place in the male-dominated world of piracy. Their presence could bring joy, or jealousy, or both. Rumors and gossip spread quickly, about romances, about quarrels, about secrets. Some men carried letters from lovers left behind. Some carved a sweetheart's name into the wood of the ship, or wore a lock of hair in a locket around their neck. Homesickness was common, and hearts were often heavy with longing. Men might speak in code, sharing memories, or hopes, or simply sitting quietly, lost in thought. A secret was hard to keep, but every man tried to keep a few. About lost gold, about crimes committed on land, about dreams for the future. The ship itself became a repository of these secrets, silent and enduring, bearing witness to every word, every laugh, every tear. The role of the outsider. Every ship had its outsiders, men who did not fit, who kept apart, who were watched with suspicion or pity. Sometimes it was a matter of language, of culture, of faith. A foreigner might struggle to be understood. A former enemy might never quite earn trust. Sometimes it was simply the mark of bad luck, an unlucky hand at cards, a habit of bad jokes, a reputation for laziness or cowardice. Outsiders found their own ways to endure. Some worked harder than anyone, earning a grudging respect. Some kept to themselves, surviving by caution and patience. Some drifted from ship to ship, never truly belonging. But in moments of crisis, a storm, a battle, a death, the lines could blur. All were needed, all were part of the crew, if only for an hour. Shared suffering, and shared joy. The true nature of pirate community was this: suffering and joy were both shared. When food ran low, when sickness spread, when the ship was battered by storms, every man felt it, every man carried a part. But so too, with moments of happiness, a good wind, a safe harbor, a prize taken and fairly divided, a letter from home. It was not a perfect community. Fights still broke out, betrayals still happened, men still nursed grudges. But at its best, the crew was more than the sum of its parts, a brotherhood forged in hardship, laughter, and the simple fact of surviving together against the endless uncaring sea. The evening rituals, as night fell, the rhythms of the ship changed, work slowed, the mood softened. Men found quiet corners to talk, to share a mug of rum, to patch a shirt or whittle a bit of wood. Stories were told again, songs rose into the darkness. The sound of a fiddle, the gentle beat of hands on a barrel, the murmur of a prayer, or a joke, these filled the hours before sleep. Below deck, men settled into their hammocks, their bodies pressed close, their minds wandering to other places. Other times, some wrote letters by the light of a candle stub, some played cards until their eyes closed. A few sat alone, watching the sea through a crack in the hull, letting the rocking of the ship carry them into dreams. Tomorrow would bring the same faces, the same struggles, the same laughter and quarrels and chores. But for a few hours each night, the ship was a place of peace, a home, of a sort, floating between worlds. The endurance of the human spirit. To survive as a pirate, was not just to endure the sea or the storms, but to endure each other, to find in the press and noise and chaos something like friendship, something like belonging. For every day spent fighting, there was a day spent laughing. For every night of loneliness, a morning of shared labor, shared hope. Some men, when their time at sea was done, could never settle again on land. They missed the closeness, the company, the certainty that they belonged to something larger than themselves. Others, once freed from the ship, never looked back, but even they carried the memory, the songs, the stories, the feeling of a hand on the shoulder, the knowledge that for a time, they were not alone. The sea was hard, but it was also a place where men could remake themselves, could find family among strangers, could learn to forgive, to endure, to hope. And so the ship sailed on, its crew bound together, not by law, not by blood, but by the simple stubborn fact of surviving together on the world's wildest road. Each sunrise found them side by side. Each sunset left them one day closer to land or to another day at sea, with only each other for company.
Raids, treasure, and the unvarnished reality of plunder. If there is one image burned into the minds of those who dream of pirates, it is that of the attack, the sudden clash of ships, the thunder of cannon, the wild dash for glory and gold. But the true nature of raiding was, like so much else in pirate life, a mixture of the spectacular and the mundane, the thrilling and the deeply tedious. For every moment of violence and victory, there were weeks, sometimes months of careful planning, tense waiting, and slow, grinding uncertainty. The quest for treasure was rarely as simple, or as rewarding, as the stories would have it. The watch for prey, a pirate ship spent far more time searching than fighting. Each day the horizon was scanned for the telltale sails of another vessel. Young eyes, sharp from years of watching, squinted against sun and spray from the crow's nest. Old hands traded rumors and tall tales, claiming to know the schedule of every merchant convoy, or the favorite routes of Spanish treasure galleons. The sea was vast and empty more often than not. Days could pass without sight of another ship. Supplies dwindled, tempers frayed, boredom became a sickness all its own. When a sail finally appeared on the horizon, the mood changed instantly. The call went up, a shout from above, a scramble on deck. Men tumbled out of their hammocks, knives and pistols tucked into belts, hearts pounding with excitement and fear. The captain and officers gathered to judge the target. Not every ship was worth the risk. A navy frigate or an armed merchant might bring disaster. A small trader, sluggish and alone, was the preferred prey. Even as decisions were made, the crew prepared. Guns were loaded, powder checked, cutlasses sharpened, boards cleared for action. Every man found his station, the routines drilled into him by endless practice and 1,000 stories. The slow, careful hunt. But rarely did pirates simply roar into action. More often, the pursuit was a slow, calculated game. The wind, always the deciding factor, might favor the prey or the hunter. The captain ordered sails trimmed. The crew worked in tense silence, every eye watching the ship ahead. Sometimes, the chase lasted hours. Sometimes, it stretched for days. Men grew impatient. Tempers flared. The smallest error, a slip in the rigging, a mistimed maneuver, could cost everything. At night, the ships might drift within sight of each other, each side waiting for dawn, for a change in wind, for a show of weakness. Lanterns were dimmed, voices hushed. No one slept deeply. Stories spread through the crew. "This one's full of silver," I heard. "Spanish gold. I swear it. A prize like this will all be kings." But just as often, the voice of caution was heard. "Last time we chased one like this, we lost half the crew. Don't trust a ship that sails too slow, too easy." The quartermaster and captain weighed the risks, balancing hope against hunger, greed against the memory of old defeats. The moment of attack. When the moment came, it was chaos, planned, practiced, but still chaos. The order was given, the flag raised, sometimes the pirate flag, sometimes a false ensign to draw the target close before revealing their true colors. The air filled with noise, the crack of musket fire, the boom of cannons, the wild, wordless cries of men preparing for battle. The ships closed, sometimes exchanging broadsides, sometimes racing to come alongside, sometimes maneuvering for hours, before the opportunity to board appeared. Boarding was the heart of the attack, and the source of most legends. Men leapt from rail to rail, swung across on ropes, charged through smoke and noise, cutlasses and pistols in hand. But the truth was far from glamorous. Boarding was a bloody, terrifying affair, loud, confusing, filled with terror and pain. The decks grew slick with blood, the air thick with gunpowder, and the screams of the wounded. Victory was never certain. A single musket ball, a well-placed cannon shot, a lucky swing of an axe, any could decide the outcome. Sometimes, the prey surrendered before a shot was fired. Many captains, seeing the black flag and the wild-eyed men on the pirate ship, chose life over cargo. In these moments, pirates preferred to accept surrender. It was safer, quicker, less likely to cost lives or damage to the precious ship. The defeated crew was disarmed, sometimes bound, sometimes set adrift in a boat, sometimes even invited to join the victors. Other times, the fight dragged on, bitter and desperate. Hatred ran deep. Navy men and merchant captains alike knew that pirates, if captured, could expect no mercy. When the battle ended, there was a moment of stunned silence, a heartbeat when every man realized he was still alive. Then the work began. The reality of plunder, the search for treasure, was rarely the stuff of fantasy. Most ships did not carry chests of gold or sacks of jewels. More often, the prize was mundane: barrels of flour, casks of wine, bundles of tobacco, bolts of cloth. Sometimes, there was sugar, coffee, cocoa, rum, valuables, yes, but not the instant wealth that ballads promised. Every hold was searched, every crate opened, every secret compartment tapped and probed. Some pirates were experts in finding hidden goods, knowing all the tricks of merchants and smugglers. There were occasional windfalls, a chest of silver coins, a cargo of spices worth a year's wages. But more often, the loot was less glamorous, and much heavier: barrels to be rolled and hoisted, sacks to be carried below, livestock to be herded onto the pirate ship. The crew worked quickly, knowing that any delay could bring trouble. A ship that lingered too long at the site of an attack risked being caught by navy patrols or rival pirates. Everything of value was taken, right down to the captain's boots or a silver spoon in the galley. Even sails, ropes, nails and spare timber were looted, if the pirates were in need. Occasionally, a prisoner's story or a merchant's plea would reveal the location of greater treasure, a hidden compartment, a stash of coins in a barrel of rice. The crew would tear the ship apart to find every last bit. Afterwards, the captured ship might be set adrift, burned, or sometimes kept as a prize, sailed by a skeleton crew to the nearest pirate haven to be sold or broken up. The prisoners themselves were a separate question. Some were ransomed, some joined the crew, some set free or abandoned on a distant shore. Rarely, a pirate ship captured a true fortune: a Spanish galleon, a slave ship laden with gold, a merchant returning from the Indies. In these cases, the victory was celebrated for years, the story growing with every telling. But more often, the treasure was just enough to keep the ship sailing, the crew fed and paid, the next voyage possible. The division of spoils. Once the plunder was secured, it was time to divide the spoils. Pirates prided themselves on fairness, at least among their own. The code was clear: the captain received a share, the quartermaster a share, the officers and crew each their own, usually according to a system agreed upon at the start of the voyage. A man who was wounded in the fight might receive extra compensation for a lost eye, a severed limb, a broken body. The surgeon, cook, and even the carpenter received their due. Arguments could, and often did, erupt over the division. The quartermaster kept careful notes, the crew watched closely, and accusations of cheating or favoritism were taken very seriously. When all was counted, each man received his share: a handful of coins, a bolt of cloth, a bottle of rum, a bag of sugar. Sometimes, the spoils were disappointing, less than promised, less than needed to pay old debts or dreams. Other times, there was celebration, a day of feasting, a night of drinking, songs and stories told until dawn. The aftermath: for a day or two after a successful raid, spirits ran high. The crew ate well, drank deeply, and celebrated their luck. But soon, the same old problems returned. The sea did not care about treasure. A storm could scatter the fleet, ruin the cargo, wash away the memory of victory in a single night. Food and water still ran short, old wounds still ached, rivalries still simmered. Some men grew careless with their winnings, gambling away a fortune in an hour, drinking it away in a day. Others hid their shares,
buried coins in secret corners, made plans for a new life that most would never reach. For every prize taken, there was a price paid, men wounded, men lost, time spent in fear and boredom. A few raids ended badly, the prey fought back, reinforcements appeared, or a hidden gun turned the tide. The pirate ship might limp away, battered and empty-handed, or not at all. The myths and the truth. The world ashore loved stories of pirate treasure, maps marked with X, buried gold, secret codes, but most pirates knew the truth. Money spent quickly, danger always close, the future never certain. A pirate who survived long enough to retire, rich or not, was a rare man. Many dreamed of one big score, the raid that would make them wealthy enough to quit the sea for good. Most spent their shares as quickly as they came, always hungry for more, always one step from ruin. The real treasure was often survival itself, a belly full of food, a dry place to sleep, the laughter of friends after a hard fight, the slow pace of pirate life. For all the violence and drama, most of a pirate's time was spent waiting for a target to appear, waiting for the wind to change, waiting for the signal to attack, waiting to count and divide the spoils. The hours dragged on, broken by moments of terror and excitement, then returning to the slow rhythm of chores and hunger, and the endless rolling sea. Some men grew restless, longing for the next fight, others dreaded it, knowing that each raid brought a new chance for death or defeat. Stories of great victories grew with the telling, but the reality was always harsher, always marked by cost. What treasure really meant when the stories are stripped of legend. Pirate treasure was never just gold. It was anything that kept the ship afloat, the crew alive, the next journey possible. A barrel of fresh water could be worth more than a chest of coins. A doctor's kit, a bag of lemons, a new set of sails. These were prizes as valuable as any gemstone. For many pirates, the dream of riches faded with time, replaced by the simpler hope of surviving another day, another raid, another storm. And in the end, the real legacy of piracy was not in hidden gold, but in the stories of raids survived, of enemies outwitted, of friends remembered long after the last coin was spent. The memory of raids, long after the loot was gone, and the wounds healed, the memories remained. Men told and retold the stories of the biggest raids, the wild chase, the moment of terror, the unexpected victory, the bitter defeat. Every scar became a story, every loss, a lesson. The crew that survived together became a family of sorts, bound not by blood or law, but by the shared experience of risk, reward and survival. On quiet nights, when the ship drifted under a sky full of stars, the old hands would gather and remember. They spoke of the ship that got away, the friend who didn't, the prize that changed everything, or nothing at all. These stories grew in the telling, becoming a kind of treasure themselves, passed down from one voyage to the next, from one crew to another, from sea to shore and back again. The true cost, every raid, every treasure, every moment of violence and glory was paid for in sweat, in fear, in the constant struggle against the sea, the law, and sometimes each other. The world ashore saw only the moment of attack, the gleam of gold, the flash of blades. The pirates themselves remembered the long waits, the hard work, the risks taken, and the price paid, sometimes in blood, sometimes in lives, always in the slow erosion of certainty and hope. For every pirate who grew rich, 100 grew old, or died young, or simply disappeared, lost to the sea, the law, or the simple weariness of the life they had chosen. In the end, the pirate ship sailed on, always searching, always hoping, always waiting for the next chance, the next prize, the next fleeting moment of glory. The sea gave and took, and the men aboard learned, slowly and painfully, what treasure truly was. It was the friend beside you, the ship beneath your feet, the sky above, and the hope that one day you might find a safe harbor, a place to rest, to remember, to be more than just a pirate chasing gold across an endless indifferent sea. And as the waves rolled on and the stories grew, the truth of pirate life remained. Treasure was real, but it was never only gold. It was survival, memory, and the stubborn, enduring hope that tomorrow, against all odds, might be better than today.
The end of the journey, old age, home, justice, and the forgotten truth, night after night, beneath the eternal rolling of the sea. Every pirate ship is carried forward, not only by the wind, but by the hope, however faint, however battered by time, that there might be a true end to the journey. For some that hope is gold, for others it is land, or love, or only the wish to survive. But for all who sailed under the black flag, there came a time when the dream of the pirate life faded, giving way to the long, slow reckoning with what remained. It is easy, in the stories told on land, to imagine that pirate life was a matter of sudden ends, death in battle, a swift execution, a ship lost forever in the teeth of a storm. The truth, as always, was much slower, much quieter, and far more ordinary. The slow arrival of old age. For most pirates, age was something that crept up quietly. Few expected to grow old. The young believed themselves invincible, their bodies hardened by salt and sun, their spirits lifted by the endless horizon. But the sea is a patient teacher, and she marks all who live long upon her. It began with aches and pains that did not heal, a knee that throbbed on wet mornings, a scar that ached before a change in the weather. The strong back bent, the quick eye dulled, teeth fell out, hair turned to silver, or vanished altogether. Aboard ship, old age meant being forced from the rigging, from the heaviest work. The youngest took your place aloft. The old hands lingered on deck, kept to quieter tasks, mending sails, tending the sick, passing down stories. There was respect for age, of a kind, if a man had survived long enough, if his tales were believed, if his wounds were many. But it was a hard respect. A man who could not pull his weight, who could not fight, or work, or stand his watch, was a burden. He might be left behind in a friendly port, or put ashore with a share of silver, and a shake of the head. A few, luckier or more beloved, became the ship's memory keepers, advisors, storytellers, peacemakers, when tempers flared. Aboard some ships, the very oldest were cherished, their knowledge seen as treasure itself, the best fishing ground, the best way to patch a torn sail, the route to safe water. Others were not so kind. When hunger struck, when space ran short, when tempers frayed, the old and sickly were among the first to be cast off, gently or not. The dream of home with age came longing for home, even among those who had spent a lifetime denying it. Home was not always a place. For some it was the memory of a village, a lover, a mother's kitchen. For others it was a tavern, a street, a patch of earth where they had once belonged. Many pirates nursed the dream that after one last voyage, they would go home. They imagined themselves returning in triumph, pockets heavy with gold, welcomed by old friends, forgiven by old enemies. The truth for most was harder. A man who had been too long at sea found that home had changed, or that he himself had changed too much to fit back into the world he'd left. A few did go home, bought a farm, opened a tavern, settled down to tell their tales to anyone who would listen. But more often, the welcome was cold. The law might be waiting, or old debts, or the simple suspicion that follows a man who has spent years among thieves. Some pirates found new homes in distant ports, Nassau, Tortuga, Madagascar, places where the law was weak, and a man's past could be forgotten, if he had the coin. But even in these places, peace was hard to find. Old enemies might appear, fortunes could vanish. The call of the sea might prove too strong. For many the ship itself became the only home they ever knew, a floating world, familiar in its discomfort, beloved in its hardship. The looming shadow of justice. As age crept in, so did the fear of justice. The law, so distant and laughable at sea, was never truly absent. Every pirate knew that capture meant trial, that trial meant a rope. The British, the Spanish, the French, all hunted pirates, all hung them when they could. Tales of justice ran through every crew. Did you hear of Black Sam, taken in the Bahamas? Henry Every's crew was caught in London, all hanged. Anne Bonny and Mary Red, last seen in Newgate prison. Some say they escaped, others not. Some pirates denied the risk, boasting that they would never be caught. Others lived in fear, checking every sail on the horizon for a navy flag, every rumor in port for the sound of the law drawing near. In reality, only a few were ever captured and tried. The sea was vast. The world for a while was full of safe havens. But for those who did fall, the process was slow and public. The trial and execution. A pirate's trial was often a spectacle, a chance for judges and townsfolk to witness the punishment of lawlessness. The accused was paraded through the streets, jeered and pelted, sometimes admired for his daring, more often despised. In court, the proceedings were swift. Witnesses told tales, Evidence was displayed. Flags, weapons, stolen goods. The accused might defend himself, might beg for mercy, might laugh in the face of judgment. Sentences were predictable: hanging, usually, or in rare cases, transportation, banishment to distant colonies. Executions were public, a warning to all. The crowd gathered, the gallows creaked. The condemned made his last speech, some proud, some defiant, some broken by fear. The bodies hung for days, crows gathering, children staring. Sometimes, a pirate's head was displayed in a cage, a final humiliation, a reminder that the sea's law ended at the shore, the reality of death. But most pirates died, not by the rope, but by the sea itself. Storms claimed the unwary, disease felled the weak, wounds went bad, hunger wore men down, a sudden fall from the rigging, a knife in a quarrel, a misjudged leap in boarding. 100 small dangers waited for every man. Some deaths were quiet, a man slipping away in his hammock, buried at sea with a few mumbled words. Others were violent, a brawl gone too far, a raid turned bloody, a cannonball splitting the deck. Death, in the end, was not a surprise. Most pirates expected it, planned for it in their own way. A few left letters, messages to family, to sweethearts, to children never seen. Some made wills, dividing their share among friends, or leaving it to the crew. Most left nothing but stories, scars, and the faint memory of a name. Legacy and memory. For a generation after the golden age of piracy, the world remembered pirates as both monsters and heroes. Ballads were sung, books written, stories traded in every port. Some pirates became legends: Blackbeard, Calico Jack, Anne Bonny, Bartholomew Roberts. Their stories grew with every telling. He could drink a barrel of rum and never fall. She fought off a dozen men with only a knife. They buried treasure so deep, not even the devil could find it. But for every legend, 1,000 pirates vanished without a trace. Their stories faded, their names forgotten, their lives remembered only in the scars they left behind. The true end, oblivion, and forgetting. Most pirates did not die with fanfare. They slipped away in the dark, in some distant port, in a storm, in a fight no one would remember. Their names were lost, their faces unrecorded, their stories told only by the wind. Their ships were broken up, their spoils divided, their bones scattered on distant shores. Some perhaps found peace, a quiet death, a friend at their side, a final look at the sea, but most were simply gone, absorbed by the great forgetting that comes to all but the most famous, or the most lucky. The sea erases all in the end. The survivors, and the final return. A few survived. They lived to see the end of piracy, to watch the world grow smaller, the law grow stronger, the ships grow faster, and the ports grow less welcoming. Some took work as sailors, pilots, fishermen, returning, in a way, to the life they had left behind. Others became tavern keepers, storytellers, oddities in their villages, marked by tattoos, by the limp of an old wound, by the look in the eye that never quite left the sea behind. A handful grew rich enough to live in comfort, but most spent their last years poor, ill, forgotten. Yet even these survivors were haunted by the memory of the ship, the closeness of the crew, the thrill of the chase, the taste of salt on the wind. In quiet moments, they would dream of the old days, of laughter on the deck, of storms survived, of friends lost and found. Some never spoke of their past, ashamed or afraid. Others told the stories again and again, until the line between truth and legend blurred, until the stories became their only legacy. How the world forgot. As the years passed, piracy faded, the seas grew safer, the law grew stronger, the ships grew bigger, the prizes fewer. The golden age of pirates was gone, remembered only in stories, in songs, in the wild imaginings of children. On land, the truth was lost beneath a tide of legend. Pirates became characters, costumes, jokes, nightmares for naughty children. The real hardship, the pain, the loneliness, the slow, grinding difficulty of life at sea, all were forgotten, replaced by the fantasy of freedom and gold. Yet, in the quiet corners of old ports, in the names of ships and islands, in the scars passed down from father to son, the memory lingered. The truth was never gone, only hidden, waiting for those who cared enough to look. The final sleep, night after night, as the sea rocked the ship to sleep.
Every pirate knew that the end was waiting. Some faced it with dread, some with hope, some with a kind of weary joy. For in the end, the pirate life was not about gold or glory, or even survival. It was about the journey, the long, slow passage from one day to the next, the brotherhood of the crew, the endless horizon, the memory of the sky. To be a pirate was to endure, to laugh in the face of storms, to find beauty in hardship, to carry on when hope was lost, and when the end finally came, whether in battle or in bed, with friends or alone, it was simply another part of the story, a story written in salt and wind, in scars and laughter, in the endless rolling song of the sea. Epilogue. What remains now, centuries later, as we drift into sleep with stories of pirates in our ears, it is worth remembering the truth behind the tales. The pirate life was never easy, never as glamorous as the legends say. It was hard, and lonely, and often short, but it was real, lived by men and women, as brave as foolish, as hopeful, and as flawed as any who ever set sail. Their legacy is not in treasure buried on distant islands, but in the stories we tell, in the lessons of courage and endurance, in the reminder that even in the harshest world, there can be laughter, friendship, and hope. So as the ship drifts on, as the stars wheel above, as the world grows quiet and sleep comes near, let us remember them, not as villains or heroes, but as people, as travelers on the endless road of the sea. Their journey is over. Ours, perhaps, is just beginning.
The afterlife of the pirate, legend, memory, and the world's endless fascination. The story of the pirate does not end when the last ship is sunk, or the last man hanged, or the last gold coin spent. Instead, it drifts onward, out of the ocean's spray and into the slow current of memory, legend, and imagination. Long after the sails have vanished over the world's edge, the pirate lives on not as a man of flesh and blood, but as a story, an idea, a shadow moving through the dreams of generations. The world without pirates. When the age of piracy faded, the world changed, yet the memory of those days did not die. In harbors where black flags once flew, merchants and governors grew old, telling their grandchildren how they outwitted or outlasted the men of the sea. In the taverns and back streets of vanished ports, Nassau, Port Royal, Tortuga, St. Mary's, voices still whispered of treasures lost, of ships that vanished in the night, of names spoken only in half-belief and half-longing. On land, the sea became mythic, the place of exile and freedom, the graveyard of hope and greed, the wild border where the law's arm ended, and only fate reigned. The last true pirates lived to see their world become legend, even as they faded from it, old, battered, marked by years of salt and sun, unrecognized by the very people who now loved the stories of their kind. They saw their names, sometimes their faces, twisted in broadsides and penny dreadfuls, in ballads and scandal sheets, their real lives forgotten for the sake of a better tale. And as these men and women vanished, the stories only grew. The birth of the pirate legend. It did not take long for the world to reimagine the pirate. Authors, printers, and songwriters turned reality into romance. The truth, so slow, so hard, so unglamorous, became something else. Pirates became heroes, rebels, outlaws with hearts of gold. Their ships gleamed, their flags were always black, their gold was never lost for long. Children heard tales not of scurvy or back-breaking work, but of wild adventures, buried treasure, and secret maps. On stage and page, pirates swaggered and joked, their voices forever bold and free. Ballads told of their defiance, their wit, their endless supply of rum and luck. The truth of hunger, boredom, old age, and disappointment slipped quietly away, as the tide slips over a forgotten sandbar. The world wanted pirates, and so pirates became whatever the world desired. The penny dreadfuls and cheap romance. In the 18th and 19th centuries, a new world of print filled the cities of Europe and America with pirate stories. Penny dreadfuls, cheap broadsides, serialized adventures poured out by the thousands. Most were written by men who had never seen the sea. Some drew inspiration from fact, retelling the exploits of Blackbeard or Anne Bonny. Others invented whole new tales, with clever captains, beautiful prisoners, and gold beyond imagining. The tropes appeared quickly: the parrot on the shoulder, the peg leg, the eye patch, the hidden cove, and the treasure map marked X. These were exaggerations, at best, or inventions altogether, but they stuck, because they were fun, and because the truth was less appealing. In these stories, pirates were often lovable rogues, battling cruel governors and greedy merchants, always outwitting the law. Suffering, loss, the slow rot of real pirate life, these became punchlines, if they appeared at all. And yet, beneath the fantasy, something real remained: the longing for freedom, the hatred of unjust law, the hope that somewhere, the world could be remade by courage and will. Pirates in the theater soon. The pirate story moved to the stage. Plays and operas, some comic, some tragic, filled the playhouses of London, Paris and New York. The audience laughed at bumbling pirate crews, gasped at the daring of their captains, wept for doomed lovers carried off to sea. The legend grew. Pirates became every man's fantasy: the poor clerk, the failed apprentice, the runaway dreaming of a life beyond the grey streets and the factory bell. For children, pirates were everything a grown-up was not: bold, loud, brave, free. For grown-ups, pirates were what childhood had lost: the chance to break the rules, to risk everything, to seize the day before it vanished. The golden age of illustration. With the coming of illustrated magazines and books, the pirate gained a new body: a hat with a feather, a sash of pistols, a sword bright as the sun. Paintings showed ships against stormy skies, chests brimming with gold, men with wild beards and flashing eyes. Even the pirates themselves would not have recognized these images, but perhaps, deep inside, they would have wished them true. Every artist added a detail: a brighter flag, a sharper cutlass, a more beautiful beach. The myth grew richer, more colorful, more impossible. Pirates in the New World across the Atlantic. The legend took on new life. In America, the pirate became a symbol of resistance, a figure to admire rather than fear. Cities like Charleston and New Orleans remembered the pirates who once sheltered in their marshes and swamps, who sometimes fought on the side of the rebels or gave aid to the outcasts. In the Caribbean, the memory of piracy mingled with the memory of empire, of slavery, of old wars and old wounds. The descendants of pirates, black, white and mixed, sometimes traced their names to a legend, or claimed kinship with the great outlaws of the past. Every island had its story, its buried treasure, its ghost ship drifting across the moonlit bay. The pirate as symbol. Over time, pirates became more than just characters in a story. They became a symbol, a way to talk about freedom, about law and lawlessness, about the dream of escape. Revolutionaries took the black flag for their own. Children marched as pirates on holidays, waving wooden swords and shouting for candy. Cartoonists, filmmakers, and songwriters reimagined the pirate again and again, sometimes as villain, sometimes as hero, sometimes as fool, sometimes as prophet. No other figure from the Age of Sail proved so endlessly adaptable, so able to carry the dreams and fears of each new generation. The Hollywood pirate. In the 20th century, the movies gave pirates a new life. On the silver screen, they leapt and fought, sang, and laughed. Douglas Fairbanks, Errol Flynn, Burt Lancaster, and hundreds more swashbuckled their way through jungles and over the decks of painted ships. Here, at last, the pirate became eternal youth: a smile, a sword, a laugh that never faded. Even as the world grew more complicated, the pirate remained simple: brave, but never cruel; greedy, but never selfish; wild, but never lost. The truth, so hard, so full of loss, became a soft background, a shadow behind the music and color. And still, something real flickered: the love of the sea, the fear of the law, the longing for another chance. Pirates in children's stories. No one loved pirates more than children. In picture books and cartoons, pirates became friends, guides and gentle monsters. They sailed to Neverland, to Treasure Island, to the edge of the world. Every child with a stick for a sword and a scarf for a flag became, for an hour, or an afternoon, the captain of their own imaginary ship. Pirates for children meant freedom, the power to make your own rules, to be brave, to dream of gold hidden just over the next hill. Yet even here, the shadow of truth lingered: the loneliness of the sea, the cost of running away, the hope that in the end, someone would remember your name. The pirate, in the modern world. As the centuries turned, the world became smaller.
The real pirates who remained sailed, not wooden ships but steel freighters, chasing not gold but hostages and ransom, and yet, the legend endured. In movies and games, in festivals and costumes, the pirate remained. The internet gave pirates new meaning. Digital outlaws, rebels against the law of the land, activists and pranksters took the pirate flag as their own, seeing in it the spirit of resistance, the willingness to break rules for the sake of a better world. Each new age remade the pirate in its own image. The lost truth. For most, the real pirate life was lost, buried under centuries of story, the loneliness, the hunger, the cold nights and bitter arguments, the slow toll of the sea. These became footnotes, or were forgotten entirely. And yet, if you looked closely, the truth remained. In every story of friendship, forged in hardship, of hope surviving disappointment, of courage blooming in unlikely hearts, there was the echo of the pirate life. The sea, always, was the final judge. The pirate's real treasure. What was the real treasure of the pirate? Not gold, though the world still dreams of it. Not fame, though names live on. The real treasure was the memory of a life lived without certainty, a life on the edge of the world, where every day brought risk, every friend was precious, every moment of laughter or song was a victory against loneliness and fear. This, more than anything, is why the world cannot forget the pirate, not because they were perfect, but because they were human, brave, flawed and hungry for meaning, in a world that offered few easy answers. The sleep of the pirate now. As we drift into sleep, the pirate story sails with us. It whispers of wild seas and strange islands, of friends and enemies, of lost gold and found hope. It reminds us that every journey, however hard, leaves behind a wake, fading, yes, but real for a time. It tells us that even the most forgotten, the most misunderstood, can shape the dreams of the world, and so in the gentle rocking of night, we remember, the pirate, long gone, still sails in story. The sea, vast and indifferent, still calls to those who listen. The dream of freedom, of friendship, of finding your own way, lives on. No ending is final, and no story is ever truly lost. Sleep well then, with the song of the sea in your heart, and let the legend carry you onward, quiet, gentle, and ever onward, toward morning.
The forgotten details, traces, habits, and the archaeology of pirate lifetime is a patient thief. It steals the gold from a chest, the paint from a mast, the laughter from a voice, but it also leaves behind the faintest traces, the scratches on a board, the button lost beneath the planks, the memory of a scent, the echo of a song. To understand what pirate life truly was, one must look not at the great battles or the famous names, but at the smallest things, the ordinary details, so easily forgotten, so quietly persistent. The lost world of the pirate ship. Imagine, if you will, stepping aboard an old pirate ship, not as a legend, but as an archaeologist. Centuries later, your hands dusted with salt, your eyes searching for what has vanished, and what remains. What do you find? The wood is grey and soft with age, the iron nails eaten by rust. In a quiet corner, a scrap of cloth, perhaps once a sleeve, now just a faded patch, catches your eye. Beneath a broken plank, a coin shines for a moment, before it is lost to shadow. A button, a comb, the stub of a clay pipe, all evidence that real men lived and worked and dreamed here. There is no treasure chest, no pile of gold. Instead there are tools, worn smooth by years of use. A hammer, a mallet, a knife with its tip snapped and resharpened a dozen times. You find the ghosts of meals, fish bones, the hard crust of biscuit, the stain of wine on old wood. You smell the memory of tar and rope, the distant trace of rum. This is what the pirate life was, day after day, ordinary, stubborn, full of tiny details that never made it into the stories. The habits of survival aboard ship. Every habit was learned by necessity. How to coil a rope so it never tangled, how to patch a sail with numb fingers in a biting wind, how to tie a knot that would not slip when life depended on it. The best hands could do their work in the dark, could feel the weather in the shift of the deck beneath their feet, could sense a coming storm before the clouds appeared. Each day, men sharpened their knives, polished their buckles, mended their clothes, Socks were patched, boots risoled with scraps of leather, shirts cut down and sewn again and again. A lucky charm, a bead, a feather, a scrap of ribbon, might be sewn into a cuff, or hidden in a pocket. Everyone had their own way of marking their hammock, or their place at the table. Some carved their initials, others scratched a symbol, an anchor, a heart, a crude drawing of a ship. These little marks lingered long after the men themselves were gone. The languages of the ship. The pirate ship was a place of many tongues. Men from England, France, Africa, the Caribbean, and beyond, brought their own words, their own curses, their own way of speaking. Aboard ship, a new language grew, words borrowed and twisted, commands shortened to a bark, nicknames invented and forgotten in a week. An Englishman might call a rope, a line, a Frenchman, a cord, a Spaniard, a cuerda. Orders were given in a mixture. Haul away, tire, adright, arriba. Over time a pidgin grew, a shared way of speaking, that belonged to no country, and every crew. This language faded with the men who spoke it. But sometimes, in old logbooks or sailors' letters, a word survives, a hint of the world that was, the music of everyday life. Every day the ship was filled with sound, the creak of timbers, the slap of waves, the thud of boots on the deck. Men sang as they worked, shanties to lift the anchor, to raise the sail, to pass the time on long watches. Some shanties were bawdy, some sad, some so old no one remembered where they began. At night someone might bring out a fiddle, a flute carved from driftwood, a drum made from a barrel lid. Music was a way to remember home, to forget fear, to bind the crew together. Sometimes the quietest men sang the loudest. Sometimes a song could stop a fight, or start one. The melodies lingered in the wood, in the memory of the waves, long after the voices were gone. The small comfort was rare, and so every little pleasure was cherished. A mug of hot water with a scrap of tea, a bit of dried fruit saved for a special day, the last bite of hardtack tucked away in a pocket, a letter from home, read 100 times, folded and unfolded until the words began to blur, a new pair of socks, a comb for tangled hair, a needle and thread, a joke whispered in the dark, a story told for the 100th time, the gift of a day without rain, a night without rats, a morning when the sun broke through the clouds. These small comforts mattered more than gold, and were remembered long after riches were gone. The private worlds, even in the most crowded ship, men found ways to keep a private world, a little notebook, filled with drawings, or lists, or the first lines of a poem, a collection of buttons, a lucky coin, a tiny carving of wood or bone. Some kept a secret stash, a sliver of sugar, a twist of tobacco, a bit of bright cloth. Others hoarded memories, a song from childhood, a prayer in a language no one else spoke, a dream of land. At night, in the silence after the last story, these private worlds were a shield against the endless sameness of the sea, the enduring routines. Pirate life was a world of routines, repeated day after day, shaping the rhythm of life. The bell marked the hours, each watch counted out, each change of crew announced in sound. Meals were served at the same time, rain or shine. Work followed work, scrape the deck, haul the line, patch the sail, clean the gun. There was comfort in repetition. Even in chaos, the routines endured, a way to measure time, to mark the difference between yesterday and today. In old ships found centuries later, archaeologists sometimes find the marks of these routines, grooves in the wood where knives were sharpened, stains where coffee or wine was spilled each morning, the worn spot where a favorite lookout always stood, the forgotten chores. Much of pirate life was work no one wanted to remember. The bilge had to be pumped, day and night, to keep the ship from sinking. The deck had to be scrubbed with sand and salt water, knees sore, backs aching. Rats and bugs had to be chased out, the hold checked for rot, the sails patched and patched again. When it rained, everything grew damp and sour. When it was dry, the wood shrank and creaked, the ropes frayed, the sails grew stiff with salt. These chores were never mentioned in songs, but they filled the hours, marked the days, made survival possible. The food and its traces. Pirate food was rarely good, but it left its mark. Hardtack, unleavened, rock-hard biscuit, was the most common meal. Old pieces found by archaeologists are sometimes stamped with teeth marks.
Even now, salt beef and pork, kept in barrels, was the main source of protein, tough and stringy, and often crawling with worms by the end of a voyage. Sometimes, there was cheese or peas, or beans, sometimes, a barrel of flour for bread. Fresh food was rare, a treasure when found. Cooking was done in a small swaying galley, fires carefully tended, meals often burned or underdone. The smell of old grease, the blackened pot, the charred edge of a barrel lid, these lingered long after the meals themselves were gone. The clothing of pirates. Pirate clothing was never as grand as the stories tell. Most men wore what they could steal or salvage, shirts patched and repatched, trousers cut down from old uniforms, coats taken from dead enemies, or abandoned ships. Bright sashes and bandanas were practical, used to wipe sweat, bind wounds, tie up a broken shoe. Jewelry, if worn, was often simple, a ring, an earring, a bead. Some men wore hats, battered and bent, to keep off the sun. Others tied their hair back with ribbon or string. Boots were prized, often traded, mended, and lost again. In shipwrecks, the scraps of these clothes sometimes survive. A button, a scrap of cloth, a rusty buckle, telling the story of the men who wore them. The traces of fear, like comfort, left its traces, scratch marks on the wood where a man gripped the rail in a storm. A hidden knife, wedged behind a beam, just in case. Prayer beads, a carved cross, a scrap of holy text kept close to the skin. Sometimes, a spot on the deck, stained darker than the rest, a mark of blood, washed away by years of rain and salt, but never quite gone. The signs of fear were subtle, but everywhere. The stories in objects. Every object aboard ship told a story. A mug chipped from 100 meals, passed from hand to hand. A spoon with a handle worn thin, carried by a dozen men, each carving their own mark. A piece of string tied around a finger, a reminder of a promise, a memory, a debt. A deck of cards, faces faded, corners rounded by play, used to pass 1,000 hours. Each object, no matter how small, was a world of memory, a thread that tied the present to the past, the living to the dead. The unwritten records. Most pirates left no written record. Few could write, fewer cared to. The rare logbook, the scribbled note, the graffiti scratched on a beam, all are precious to those who seek the truth of pirate life. But the real record was in the ship itself. The patched sails, the worn ropes, the bent nails, the faded marks on the hull. In these the story endures, not of kings and battles, but of ordinary men, living ordinary lives, in an extraordinary world. The archaeology of memory. In the end every pirate ship becomes an artifact, drifting, sinking, found and lost again. Those who come after can only guess at the lives lived aboard, piecing together stories from scraps and stains, from buttons and beads, from the shape of a spoon or the groove worn by a favorite knife. The truth is never certain, but always there, just beneath the surface, waiting to be found. The gentle endurance. What remains, after all is forgotten, is the gentle endurance of those who lived and worked and dreamed together. Their laughter, their arguments, their hopes and fears, these linger in the smallest things, the details no one ever thought to remember. To drift into sleep with these stories is to join them, for a moment, in the slow, patient journey across the world. The ship in the dark. At the end of each day, the ship is quiet. The crew sleeps. The waves rock the hull. The wind whispers through the rigging. Somewhere, a button falls from a shirt. A knife is tucked away. A song drifts into silence. The details fade, but never truly vanish. And as night deepens, the world remembers, if only in dreams, the forgotten truth of pirate life, that even in hardship, in hunger, in loneliness, the smallest comforts endure, the gentlest hopes survive, and the story is never truly lost.
Anxiety, dreams, and the inner life of the pirate. Beneath the shouts, the storms, and the chase for gold, every pirate carried a private world, a landscape of memory, anxiety, hope, and regret. The outside world, with all its noise and motion, was only half the story. The rest was lived in the quiet between watches, in the hush after the cannon's roar, in the darkness behind a sleeping man's eyes. To speak of pirates only as bold, wild men is to miss the slow, invisible struggle that shaped their everyday. the burden of worry, the ache of homesickness, the restless dreams that never let them go. The constant anxiety life on a pirate ship was a world of unknowns. Danger was everywhere, but rarely where it was expected. At any hour the wind could shift, the sky could darken, the ship could lurch. Any day might bring hunger, sickness, storm, betrayal, or the sudden flash of a navy flag on the horizon. Most pirates learned to live with this constant unease. They grew used to the background hum of worry, the half-heard rumor of mutiny, the scrape of boots in the night, the question of whether the captain could be trusted, whether a friend might turn foe if the gold ran short. This anxiety showed itself in habits, the way a man checked his knife 3, 4, 5 times before sleeping, the small hoard of food or water hidden in a shoe, a pouch, a secret pocket, the glances cast at the horizon, the tally of days since the last sight of land. Sometimes it showed in silence, a man withdrawing, growing quiet, speaking only when spoken to. Other times it sparked anger, quick words or sudden fights that seemed to flare for no reason at all. A pirate's laughter could turn to suspicion in a heartbeat. A friendship could sour over a missed share, or a whispered slight. The stress was a slow, grinding thing, never quite gone, always shaping the days and the dreams of those who lived at sea. The weight of homesickness. Every pirate, no matter how long at sea, remembered home. For some it was a clear memory, a mother's voice, a street in a distant town, the smell of bread baking, the feel of grass underfoot. For others, it was only a longing, a shape without detail, a feeling of something lost and never quite replaced. Homesickness could strike at any time. A song might bring it on, a melody remembered from childhood, sung soft in the darkness below deck. A letter, rare as gold, might make a grown man cry, or stare at the wall for hours, lost in memory. Even the work of the ship could trigger it. The taste of salt on the wind, the shape of a cloud, the sound of rain on the deck. Some men spoke of home often, telling stories again and again. Others kept silent, hiding their ache behind jokes or anger, or work. It was understood, in the way that only shared hardship can be. Everyone missed something, and everyone suffered in their own way. The quiet hopes beneath the anxiety, beneath the homesickness, hope endured. Not the loud, boastful hope of ballads, but a quiet, stubborn kind, a hope that life might change, that a voyage might end well, that gold might buy peace or love, or simply rest. Some hoped for redemption, a chance to start over, to return to land, to be forgiven for whatever had driven them to sea. Others dreamed only of escape, from the ship, from the crew, from the endless risk and uncertainty. A few, rarer still, found hope in the life itself, in the freedom of the sea, in the laughter of friends, in the knowledge that every day survived was a day claimed from a world that had given them little. These hopes were rarely spoken aloud. To admit hope was to admit weakness, and most pirates learned to hide their softest parts. But the hope was there, in every saved coin, every plan for the future, every letter begun and never sent. Night and dream. The true inner life of the pirate revealed itself at night, when the ship was quiet, when the sea rocked the hammocks, and the only sound was the creak of wood and the soft breath of sleeping men. Dreams came, soft or savage, remembered or lost by morning. Some dreamed of home, of a door opening, of arms waiting, of a world without fear. Others dreamed of gold, of finding it, losing it, spending it, burying it, and forgetting where. Many dreamed of the sea itself, endless, wild, beautiful and terrible. They woke sweating, heart pounding, reaching for a knife or a friend or a drink to steady their nerves. Nightmares were common. The dead returned, old friends lost to storm or fight, enemies with faces twisted by hate or fear. Some men talked in their sleep, voices thick with old regret or remembered violence. Others lay awake, eyes open in the dark, haunted by thoughts they would never share by daylight. Dreams were a secret life, a world where pirates became children again, or kings, or beggars, or simply themselves, stripped of bravado, laid bare by sleep. Secrets, shame, and regret pirates, for all their roughness, carried shame. Some were driven to sea by poverty, by crime, by war, by choices they could never take back. Others left families behind, children never seen, lovers never written to, debts never repaid, Stories told among the crew were rarely the whole truth. Most men carried secrets, a lie told to survive, a friend betrayed, a theft unconfessed, a hope for forgiveness. Some sought comfort in drink, in laughter, in anger. Others bore their shame in silence, hardening against the world, growing distant even from those they trusted most. Forgiveness, for pirates, was rare, and harder still to grant oneself. The inner world of ritual to manage their anxiety. Pirates developed rituals. Some were shared, prayers before battle, songs sung at sunset, routines of work and rest. Others were private, touching a lucky charm, saying a silent prayer, tying a knot a certain way. These rituals brought order to a world of chaos. They gave a sense of control, a belief that fate could be bargained with, that luck could be turned, that the sea itself might be appeased. When a ritual was broken, a charm lost, a song left unsung, anxiety spiked, fear sharpened, tempers flared. In the end, ritual was as much a part of pirate life as food or sleep or laughter, a way to build a private world inside a public one, a shield against fear. Friendships and confessions. Friendship, for pirates, was both a comfort and a risk. To trust another man was to admit weakness, to share secrets that might one day be used against you. But trust was also a necessity. No one could endure the sea alone. Late at night, when the rest of the crew slept, two friends might share their stories. The home left behind, the crime committed, the hope for something more. These confessions were rare, and rarely complete, but they mattered. In a world where danger was everywhere, friendship was a lifeline, a way to keep the darkness at bay. Even the hardest men softened, at times under the weight of kindness. A joke, a mug of rum, a hand on the shoulder. These were the gifts that made survival possible. The fears that linger. Pirates feared many things, but some fears were too deep for words. The fear of dying alone, of being forgotten, of leaving no trace. The fear of madness, a mind worn thin by hunger, by isolation, by the endless sameness of the sea. The fear of betrayal, of being cast out, of losing the only home left. These fears haunted the quiet moments, the long night watches, the empty horizon. They drove men to acts of kindness and of cruelty, to moments of great courage and of reckless risk. They shaped the stories pirates told, the jokes they made, the fights they picked, and the peace they kept. Memory and nostalgia. For the older pirates, memory was a double-edged sword. The past was both a comfort and a curse, a place to visit in dreams, but also a reminder of all that had been lost. Some remembered glory, the biggest prize, the wildest storm, the friend who saved a life or risked their own. Others remembered shame, a choice never forgiven, a betrayal never forgotten, a love never reclaimed. Nostalgia could strike suddenly, a smell, a song, a line in a story. Some men told their stories again and again, needing to be heard, to be remembered, to be known. Others kept silent, fearing that the past once spoken would become too real, too heavy to bear. Imagination, and escape in the endless days at sea. Imagination became a form of escape. Men dreamed up stories, some true, some wild invention. They pictured new lives, a farm in Jamaica, a tavern in Boston, a quiet room in Lisbon, a lover's arms in a city never seen. These dreams filled the empty hours, gave shape to hope, made suffering bearable. For some the dream was enough, for others it was a torment, a reminder that the world was bigger than the ship, that life might have been different. Imagination, like memory, was both a blessing and a burden. The slow work of healing. For those who survived long enough, healing was possible. The scars of the sea, physical and mental, faded or grew familiar. Time softened anger, dulled regret, made old wounds easier to bear. Some men found peace in the company of friends, in the rhythm of work, in the knowledge that they had survived when so many had not. Others found solace in silence, in solitude, in the quiet acceptance of what had been. Forgiveness of self and of others came slowly, if at all. But even the hardest life could end in peace. A quiet death, a last look at the sea, the knowledge that for a time, you belong to a world all your own. The enduring humanity, beneath the legend,
The pirate was always human. He feared, he hoped, he dreamed, he loved. He carried secrets and regrets, bore shame and longing, reached for meaning in a world that offered little. His life was hard, but it was also full of moments, of laughter, of kindness, of hope, that no story can fully capture. The inner life of the pirate is a reminder that even in the hardest places, the most unlikely hearts can endure, can heal, can hope. The final rest, as the ship drifts on, as sleep comes, the pirate's dreams carry him beyond the horizon, into a world where fear and hope are one, where the sea is gentle, where the end is a beginning. And so, night after night, the slow, quiet struggle continues. The anxiety that shapes the day, the dreams that soften the night, the hope that endures, unspoken beneath it all. Sleep well then, with these stories in your heart, and remember, even in legend, even in darkness, the human spirit endures, and the journey is never truly over.